From all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. From the mountains of Kentucky to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator Adam Keller. Today, we talk to workers from Amazon in North Carolina who are unionizing. We're going to be talking about some great UAW news, and we have a message for federal workers. All that and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the show today, we've got a phone number. The number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. We'll be opening the lines up later in the program. You can leave us a voicemail at any time, and we might respond to it on the next show. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, TVLR.fm. We are also on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, though, all at the Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners, so if you want to become a sustaining donor to the program or just make a one-time donation, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate or patreon.com/the Valley Labor Report. We've got a bunch of really cool merch for sale at tvlr.fm/store. We have our logo dad cap available. Pre-orders are still open, or not pre-orders. We have in stock now our union-made matchbooks. They are really cool. They say fire your boss. So if you smoke, if you like to do campfires, if you have candles around your house that you need fires for, you need to get our union-made matchbook. It's really cool, folks. Order it. tvlr.fm/store. And finally, if you're a member of a union, then you should think about getting your local to sponsor the show. You can reach out to us for more details on that.
And let me add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We want to welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, Unclaimed Mysteries Internet Radio, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WMMT, WGOW, WLWI, or through your favorite podcast app. We are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out. And as most of you know, we are not media professionals. Just a few diehard union brothers who want to amplify the voices of the working class here in the American South. We're hoping this project can make a difference on that front, and we can't do it without you. So we want to thank everyone for tuning in, whether you're a loyal fan or a first-time listener. We appreciate you spending some time with us.
Absolutely. And you may have noticed a new call sign there, WLWI. Tomorrow will be the first time that our program plays on WLWI, a Cumulus radio station in Montgomery, Alabama. So we hope that hope that listeners there enjoy the program, particularly if you work at Hyundai. Hope you enjoy the program. We love the folks down there at Hyundai. We've talked to Hyundai workers on the show before.
Hey, so maybe legislators in the State House will be tuning in.
Maybe.
Every Sunday in Montgomery.
Maybe, that's right. Yeah, so we're now on 6 stations in 4 states. It's a really exciting time here, at least in some respects here at the Valley Labor Report. Very, very gloomy times in other respects. But for our project specifically and its future, things are looking relatively good.
Yeah, and we can't do that without y'all. We really
Yeah.
appreciate the support, the engagement, the folks, whether you're, online listener or you are on the radio. A lot of folks consume our stuff different ways. Some people just check out the clips on YouTube later in the week. Some people listen to the whole episode every live stream and engage in our chat on YouTube. So thanks for all those people. And also, of course, we always love the call-ins. The call-ins and the voicemails make a big difference. And we know that our listeners like to hear from other workers across the South and across the world even, about what's going on in their lives and the struggles they're facing in their communities. So really appreciate all the support, y'all.
Indeed. And so the first segment that we start off with every week is Last Week in Southern Labor. We take a look at what workers in the U.S. South and the American colonies were up to last week. Here's what they were up to from January 17th to 24th in new union campaigns. 500 workers at 5 popular restaurants owned by 2 famous restaurateurs, Les Diplomats, St. Anselm, and Pastis from Stephen Starr, and Rasika Penn Quarter and Modena from Ashok Bajaj in Washington, D.C. all announced their intent to unionize with Unite Here Local 25 and sought voluntary recognition. So far, it appears that at least St. Anselm and Pastis have declined because 95 workers at St. Anselm and 104 workers at Pastis have filed petitions to hold union elections with Unite Here Local 25. Additionally, the union has filed a complaint with the James Beard Foundation Awards Ethics Committee calling for an investigation into Rasiki, alleging, quote, inhumane, exploitative, or unlawful workplace practices, retaliation against workers who raise legitimate concerns, stealing of wages or tips, and bullying through conduct, as well as starting a, quote, aggressive anti-union campaign. According to the Washington, D.C. Eater, JBF's Code of Ethics state that a credible allegation may result in the disqualification of an entrant, nominee, or semi-finalist, as well as prohibit them from using the seal logo or image tied to its 35-year-old awards program. This complaint also coincided with the union filing a ULP alleging the same actions with the NLRB. 410 workers at Credence Management Solutions in Washington, D.C. filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, Local 1900. 15 workers at Wayne Farms in Enterprise, Alabama, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, IAMAW. 61 workers at FSCX and at Fort Rucker, Alabama, filed a petition to hold a union election with the IAMAW. 12 workers at Starbucks in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, filed a petition to hold a union election with Starbucks Workers United. 16 security guards at South Texas Project Nuclear Operating Company in Bay City, Texas, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Union of Security, Police, and Fire Professionals of America, SPFPA. 20 workers at Reconsidered Goods in Greensboro, North Carolina, filed a petition to hold a union election with the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union, RWDSU. 10 workers at Southeastern Service Corporation, a Compass Group company in Tampa, Florida, filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Union of Operating Engineers, IUOE. 19 workers at the American Red Cross in Tulsa, Oklahoma, filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW, Local 1000, and 225 security guards at MVM in El Paso, Texas, filed a petition to hold a union election with the United Government Security Officers of America, UGSOA, Local 332. In election results, 28 workers at the Veterans Affairs National Cemetery Administration's Memorial Products Service at 3 remote processing facilities in Illinois, Kansas, and Tennessee voted 14-0 in favor of unionization with the American Federation of Government Employees, AFGE, Local 17. 3 workers at Tucker Castleberry Printing in Atlanta, Georgia, filed a petition for a union election with the Printing, Packaging, and Production Workers Union, Local 527M, but withdrew the petition in the same week. 14 workers at the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network in Washington, D.C. withdrew their petition for a union election with the Pacific Media Workers Guild, a News Guild CWA affiliate, Local 39521. They did confirm with us that that is because they secured voluntary recognition. 25 workers at the North Carolina Association of Educators in Raleigh, North Carolina, withdrew their petition for a union election with the North Carolina Staff Organization. 202 workers at Phoenix Paper Wickliffe in Wickliffe, Kentucky, withdrew their petition for a union election with the IAMAW. 1,350 principals, supervisors, and administrators in Fairfax County, Virginia, voted 96% in favor of unionization with the Fairfax County Federation of Principals, Supervisors, and Administrators. This follows a massive union win among school staff and their recent contract ratification in the same county. Workers at Wilmington Terminal Railroad, a subsidiary of Ganessian, Wyoming in Wilmington, North Carolina, voted unanimously in favor of unionization with the Sheet Metal Air and Rail and Transportation Workers Union, SMART. In strikes and bargaining updates, members of SMART recently voted to ratify a national collective bargaining agreement with the National Carriers Conference Committee, NCCC. The 5-year contract provides wage increases of 18.8%, enhancements to health and welfare benefits with no increase to employee contribution rates, and access to more paid vacation time for employers earlier in their careers. Low-wage workers, bus riders, and Z-Trip IRIS drivers with stand-up Kansas City joined the Amalgamated Transit Union, ATU, Local 1287 members and community allies to rally against cuts to bus routes and union driver and maintenance jobs in the Kansas City Area Transit Authority's budget. Costco Teamsters nationwide have voted by an overwhelming 85% margin to authorize a strike. The vote is a direct result of the company's continued failure to bargain constructively and refusal to present a fair contract offer that reflects the company's record-breaking profits. The Costco Teamsters National Master Agreement, covering more than 18,000 Costco workers nationwide, expires on January 31st. Costco recently reported $254 billion in annual revenue and $7.4 billion in net profits, a 135% increase since 2018. Reports continue to trickle out about the state of bargaining between the UAW and Volkswagen regarding the Chattanooga facility. So far, the highlights are an offer of a 14% raise over 4 years plus cost of living adjustments, but the UAW said that won't cut it, in no small part because the COLA would be capped at 25 cents an hour a year. The Society of Professional Engineering Employees in Aerospace, SPEA, an IFPTE affiliate, is investigating Boeing, where the union represents 17,000 engineers in Seattle, over allegations that it is sending union work to non-union locations. Hayes County EMS workers, unionized with the Communication Workers of America, Local 6115 in Texas, ratified their first union contract after winning their union in September of 2023. The union says the contract includes raises, additional pay for bilingual workers, and an expanded retirement plan. 45 workers for Hertz at the Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport unionized with the Teamsters. Local 745 went on strike last week after the company refused to agree to a fair contract. Workers voted down a subpar offer on January 17th and have been on strike since the 18th. The strike is an indefinite one. Nurses at University Medical Center in New Orleans, Louisiana, unionized with the National Nurses Union, NNU, voted to authorize a second strike as the hospital continues to stonewall at the bargaining table. The two-day strike will take place on February 5th and 6th. Amtrak dining car stewards unionized with SMART ratified a contract that secured a 40% raise over the 7-year life of the contract from 2022 to 2028, along with 10 weeks of paid parental leave, a new holiday, and more. As Starbucks workers continue to fight for a new contract, the new CEO, Brian Nickel, was paid $96 million for just 4 months of work last year. That's insane. In political and legislative updates, the U.S. Court of Federal Claims ruled in favor of the Associated Builders and Contractors, ABC, the non-union trade construction organization, a bunch of scabs, saying that Biden's executive order mandating project labor agreements, PLAs, which are agreements with the area building trade unions setting wage, safety, and training standards on projects, Biden's executive order on mandating PLAs on federal construction over $35 million is illegal, again, according to this U.S. Court of Federal Claims. Biden's PLA executive order, however, so far has not been among those rescinded by Trump. So we are anticipating a repeal of that decision. And an appeal of that decision, sorry. Trump's flurry of executive orders have particularly attacked federal workers, instituting a hiring freeze, despite the fact that the federal workforce has only grown 6%, despite a 57% population growth in 50 years, trying to severely cut back telework, even though telework has not been tied to a loss in productivity, and attempting to politicize the federal service by doing away with merit-based hiring for who knows how many thousands of positions. AFGE, along with others, is suing DOGE, saying that it is not complying with the Federal Advisory Committee Act, FACA, because DOGE's members do not have a fair balance of viewpoints, meetings are held in secret and without public notice, and records and work product are not available to the public. AFGE says they previously sent a letter to Trump transition co-chairs Howard Lutnick and Linda McMahon regarding their concerns about the failure to comply with this law and requesting representation on the advisory group to ensure that it met the law's requirements. A Trump transition spokesperson rejected the request, saying, quote, "We have no room in our administration for Democrats." Public Citizen and AFGE have yet to receive responses. The U.S. Postal Service released its review of mail-in balloting from the last election with some insanely impressive results. Here we go. The Postal Service processed 99.22 million ballots in the 2024 general election, and 99.88% of all ballots were delivered from voters to election officials within 7 days. 97.73% of ballots were delivered from voters to election officials within 3 days. Less than 2 days on average for ballots to deliver from election officials to voters, and 1 day on average to deliver ballots from voters back to election officials. That is impressive. Surprisingly, Rohit Chopra, Biden's head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, is still at the post at the end of Trump's first week in office. Peter Navarro, who is currently serving as a senior counselor to the president, has expressed support for him in the past, saying, quote, "The MAGA folks should embrace him." David Dayen reports for the American Prospect that businesses being regulated by the CFPB are big mad. You'll remember that Elon Musk expressed explicit interest in, quote, deleting the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. While Chopra is still fighting for consumers, only last week announcing a new settlement with Argus Information and Advisory Services, which is a serial violator of financial and data privacy laws, and issued a new request for information on the consumer credit market. While Chopra is still fighting for consumers in those ways, after having made corporate criminals return $6 billion to consumers and pay $3 billion in civil penalties, Lena Khan's replacement at the FTC, Andrew Ferguson, announced all the work that he is doing eliminating DEI at the FTC, time that he could have spent protecting consumers. The North Carolina Republican Congressperson Greg Murphy, also a doctor, is calling for United Healthcare to be broken up. UAW President Shawn Fain wrote in an op-ed for the Washington Post that the union is ready to work with President Trump on trade policy, and Congress passed the Laken Riley Act last week, which would require mandatory detention of undocumented immigrants simply accused of a crime, a move that even ICE has said is simply not possible, and that will undoubtedly line the pockets of the private prison industrial complex. That is it for our union updates. If we missed anything, let us know at tvlr.fm/contact. We're going to take a break really quick and be right back with two Amazon workers from North Carolina who are going to be voting on a union in the coming weeks. Stay tuned, folks.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger food drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit NALC.org.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Folks, labor creates all wealth. All wealth should go to labor. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. If you've got anything to add, you can give us a call. Leave us a voicemail. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. So last year, just want to say appreciate everybody tuning in. We've got some 30-something folks watching us on YouTube, and not quite as many people have liked the stream yet, so go ahead and like the stream if you have not. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us in the chat. Pisa Clayton says, hi, y'all. Matt says, every Saturday in the mail truck makes the day go better. Thank you. Glad. Love for folks to listen to us on the clock. That's our favorite thing. The Polish Hammer says hello. We might talk about Adam's connection to that nickname momentarily. And Justin says, solidarity from AFGE 1003. It's rough out there, fellas. Indeed, it is. Matt says, Linda McMahon, you can't make this up. Yep. Mark says, deadline for the extended timeline to receive ballots for the NALC tentative agreement is this Monday, January 27th. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Good to know.
You are basically, if you haven't mailed in your ballot yet, then it's too late. We might talk about that in overtime. But going to be talking to a couple of Amazon workers from North Carolina here in just a moment. But I wanted to share this story with you first. Last year, some 230 workers at an Amazon warehouse in Quebec, Canada, unionized with the Confederation of National Unions, the first group of Amazon workers in Canada to have taken that step. This was the culmination of a 3-year union campaign during which the union alleges it faced significant retaliation from the company with several allegations of improper dismissals. Now, following peak season, Amazon has decided not only are they going to completely fire that entire group of workers, they are also closing all of their warehouse and logistics operations in the entire province of Canada, eliminating some 1,700 jobs. They insist that this is not because of the union campaign and that it will simply be easier and cheaper to serve customers through a third-party delivery model. This is in direct contrast to all of their actions over the last decade or so, according to the New York Times. In their reporting, they note that pulling operations out of a major population center is contrary to what Amazon has touted in recent years as a central driver of success within its operations, putting more products closer to customers to enable faster delivery. That, Amazon has repeatedly said, drives down delivery costs and causes customers to order more frequently. Amazon has not abandoned direct operations from a large population center in North America in years, although more than a dozen years ago, it routinely played hardball with states that tried to collect taxes for online sales. That's again from the New York Times reporting. We, of course, know that this is because Amazon is not actually doing this for consumer benefit. Amazon is doing this to union bust and to chill other union efforts. And some that are listening right now will hear this story and conclude that, in fact, that is the correct course of action. We need to cease union organizing. Workers at unionizing facilities need to put their head down and abandon union campaigns, because if you don't, you will lose what little you do have. However, this is exactly the opposite of what you should do, because if Amazon workers don't organize, Amazon will continue to take advantage of them, and Amazon workers will have no recourse against actions like the ones taken in Quebec and the everyday injustices that these workers face. But if they all unionize and they all come together, then they can fight back. And the UAW just put on a masterclass on the importance and effectiveness of having a nationwide union and a nationwide militant democratic union at an employer. I'm talking about last week's resolution of their months-long fight with Stellantis. You'll remember that back in 2023, they went on strike against the big three automakers in the United States, and they won huge gains in that contract, gains that will amount to, for some workers, 150% or more wage increase by the end of the contract for workers that were at the bottom of the pay scale. But importantly, at Stellantis, they secured a first ever commitment to reopen an idled manufacturing plant, this particular one in Belvidere, Illinois. Well, Stellantis, for the last 6 months or so, under former CEO Carlos Tavares, has been saying that, maybe never mind. Maybe we're not going to do that. Maybe we're just going to ignore the commitments that we made to the UAW, to these communities, and to the American people. But importantly, the United Auto Workers won yet another important provision in their contract, the right to strike nationally over product placement decisions and disinvestment. So the UAW said, when Carlos Tavares said, I don't want to honor my commitment anymore, the UAW came back and said, if you don't honor your commitment, we will strike your whole company and put all of your profits in jeopardy. Last week, after months of pressure, after an escalating campaign by the UAW, Stellantis reversed course. The union said in a press release, Stellantis has committed to build the next generation of Dodge Durango at the Detroit Assembly Complex and to reopen the Belvidere Assembly Plant in 2027 and allocate a new mid-size truck as agreed to in the union's 2023 contract. Both of these commitments had been walked back by disgraced former CEO Carlos Tavares and are being honored by the company's new leadership. Stepping away from the press release for a second, Carlos Tavares being fired by the Stellantis board of directors is in large part due to the UAW's pressure campaign. Back to the press release. This victory is a testament to the power of workers standing together and holding a billion-dollar corporation accountable, said UAW President Shawn Fain. We've shown that we will do what it takes to protect the good union jobs that are the lifeblood of places like Belvidere, Detroit, Kokomo, and beyond. The company also committed to a significant investment in Kokomo, announcing plans to build phase 2 of the GME T4 EVO engine beginning in 2026, reversing plans to move work out of this country. There will be no change to existing GME T4 EVO production at the Dundee engine plant. And finally, the company committed to increased component production at the Toledo machining plant. As the UAW just decisively showed, the answer to these blatant anti-worker, anti-union attacks by Amazon is not to give up. The answer is not to lay down. The answer is that more people need to stand up. More people need to fight and fight harder. And that is how you will be able to turn Amazon from a crap job into a good paying union career. Here to talk to us some more about exactly that is Mary Hill and Italo Medalius from North Carolina. Mary Hill is the vice president of Carolina Amazonians United for Solidarity and Empowerment. Italo is the secretary of Cause. Mary, Italo, welcome to the Valley Labor Report. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Jacob, thank you for having us, my friend.
Yes.
Really excited to talk to y'all. Like I said, this is an incredibly important development for Amazon workers, of course, in North Carolina, but across North America, right? And so I want to take a step back. I want to take a step back from kind of the story that I was just talking about, and I want to give y'all an opportunity to talk some more about your history and how and why you got involved in this now years-long fight to organize Amazon, and we can start with you, Mary.
Hi, thank you so much for presenting us with this opportunity. Wow, I guess I would just start at the beginning of how Cause All came to be. It was in the middle of the pandemic when they kept trying to send Reverend Ryan, who is our president, into a hotspot in the facility. And he had seniors like his grandmother, grandparents that were at a higher risk when you have underlying health conditions. And they kept trying to send him in these hotspots and telling us that we didn't have a choice. We're like, what? What do you mean I don't have a choice? Are you kidding me? So he went home, he prayed about it, and he got this inspiration or this vision. He came back the next day and presented his vision to me and said he got the message organized. He said, what does that mean, organize? We need to organize our workers because we're sure that we weren't the only two that were being forced to go into these other areas, other hotspots. And it was his baby. He came up with the idea of organize, and I came up with Cause. Because it's been my experience, if I have an acronym for something, I can remember. So I came up with Carolina Amazonians United for Solidarity and Empowerment. And we started with a petition that was a little over 3 years ago to find out what the majority of our co-workers could agree on. And those top 3 were safety hazards, better pay, and longer breaks. So that's how cause came about. And here we are 3 years later with an election.
Italo, can you talk to us about some of the problems that that you and other Amazon workers are facing that you would like to see addressed, by a union campaign and a union contract? What are some of the biggest problems that you and your coworkers have at Amazon facilities?
Sure, and Mom Mary talked about a few of them, but I think the biggest thing, really, Jacob, is this idea of dignity. I think a lot of us that work at Amazon, and it doesn't have to be just in the South, it can be anywhere. They treat us like robots. We're not human to them. Just as an example, when I first started, I used to work in pack. Literally just sitting in an assembly line and packing the packages that will go out to be delivered. I never knew my manager's name, who my actual manager was, for about a year. And everybody that would come over and sort of be a manager, because we have many managers over us. Sometimes we don't even know who the actual one is. They never even knew my name. So one of the things that we have when we walk around Amazon warehouses, we have a blue badge with like a user ID on it. And it says, it's just like a bunch of little letters that just for them to be able to identify you within the computer. And that's what they would call me. And I realized very early on that that's a very normal thing, that they don't even treat you like a human being. Another thing is a lot of our folks get a lot of injuries. We have some of the most injuries in any Amazon facilities, not just in the South, but in the nation. Even before peak season, right? There was one, they used to put the ratings of injuries up on a little board. And at one point, there were like 2,000 injuries that happened in the time span of a week. And if you know the size of our warehouse, that's like half the warehouse that was injured within the time span of a week. So things like injuries and dignity of being treated like a human and not like, some chattel in a plantation is on top of the pay, the breaks, the paid time off, the flexibility. Even looking at our brothers and sisters across the street at UPS, they have a union, and they make less money than what we make Amazon. But they get pension, they get a higher starting wage, and they get just much better benefits than we do. So we can see the effects of unionization right across the street, and we want that too. We know what unionization does. And we want to be a part of that.
Exactly. Yeah, we're getting some feedback from y'all. I don't know if you could, if the two of you could mute when you're not speaking, or maybe get some earbuds. I'm not exactly sure where the feedback is coming from, but could you tell us, some more about, like, so those are some of the problems. Like talk to us about what does the work of an Amazon employee look like? You clock in, you're going to clock in maybe even tomorrow. I don't know what y'all's schedule is, but y'all are both workers at the North Carolina Amazon facility, RDU1. The next time that you clock in, what is the work that you and your coworkers are going to be doing? And we can stay with you, Italo.
Yeah, and I'm just going to turn my volume down, so hopefully you don't get much feedback.
That sounds a lot better.
Is that better, Jacob?
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome. So I'm actually going to be clocking in today at 3:30. So I'm going to be getting right in there. What it's like to work in an Amazon facility? It's a little bit different. One of the first things that I always hear, and that I felt the first time that I walked into an Amazon, and I think anybody that you talk to will tell you the same thing. It feels like a neo-plantation. The best way that we can describe it. There is a very clear power imbalance. There is a racial component to that power imbalance. And if I can describe it, it's a mile-long warehouse. So it's a rectangle that you see. It's about a mile long, and there's like green tape that shows where you can walk across the warehouse. So as soon as you walk in, you will walk across what's called the Green Mile, and it'll take you across everywhere in the warehouse. So if you think about the warehouse, it's like a horseshoe. So you have your rectangle of the warehouse, and then the horseshoe in the back. That's called the ship dock. That's where I work, where all of the boxes come in, and we load them into the trucks. And like I mentioned, it's about a mile long. So what I do as a water spider is, and you can't tell from looking at me, but I'm like 5'3" and 130 pounds, so I'm very small. And a lot of my coworkers always see me, lugging around these huge carts. And a lot of us think that I was placed there so that from Amazon to be able to kind of boot me out of there. It's a very physically demanding job, and you see big burly guys doing that job. And we walk, if we track our Apple Fitness, we walk approximately like 21 to 25 miles a day doing ship dock water spidering. So that's the ship dock. And then where Mom Mary works, you have the packers, which are right underneath the ship dock folks. So you have your singles pack where you're packing, single boxes. And then you also have your AFE pack, where it's where I used to pack, which is like an assembly line of packing. So they really like to separate us, and it's very compartmentalized, which is one of what we believe is the science that Amazon implements in order to keep us away from one another. Each of these little departments are like little cities in and of themselves. Like I mentioned before, we have like 4,700 people that work inside of that warehouse. So it's, like a little city, and each department is like a neighborhood, different cultures, different ways of that management handles you. Some people play music, some people don't. So it's very, very, very distinct. It's more like a little city in there. And then on top of us, we have 3 more floors of people that work with the robots, and they do a lot of the stowing. So, like I mentioned, it's a very compartmentalized place. You're kind of stuck within your department, and you're surveilled all of the time. I mean, I'm talking microphones, security when you first walk in. You have to scan yourself into a badge onto like almost anything so that they know what they're looking at. So it's a very stressful environment to work in. There's a lot of noise, and that constant surveillance it really beats you down, which is why a lot of people don't last at Amazon at all. Our turnover rate is over 100%.
Right. And so, Mom Mary, you said that y'all started Cause about during the pandemic, so maybe even more than 3 years ago now. What have you?
No, it was in January. January was our 3-year anniversary.
Gotcha. And so, what have y'all been doing in those intervening 3 years?
Ooh. A lot. Like I said, we started with the petition. Then we just started building rapport with our coworkers, finding things, issues we could agitate on, finding out what they wanted to change at Amazon, what they didn't like. For example, I don't remember, I guess it's been about a year now. They changed our break times. They didn't come and ask us. We just showed up at work one day and our break times were changed. They didn't think about people that are insulin dependent, that have to take their insulin when they eat at a certain time every day. They didn't think about people that take dialysis. They didn't consider this. To them, to Amazon, we're just an algorithm. That's how they deal with this. And that's computer language. We're human beings. And we've been educating people, or trying to the best of our ability. And once you find common ground and things that people want to change, then that's what we act on. So we've been educating them as to their rights according to the NLRB, what we can do. And we've been teaching them the power of coming together, being united on one front. So it's just constant. That's how we got to an election.
Yeah,
talking to our coworkers.
what made
Beg your
you
pardon?
yeah, what made you think that now is the time to pull the trigger and have an election? You know, you said you kind of celebrated your 3-year anniversary this January, and so you know you've been around for a while. What was it that you said when you filed the petition for the election that yes, now is the time?
Well, you know, according to the NLRB, it requires 30%. And we felt real strong and confident that we had that 30%, and we did. So we had a press conference Labor Day, which was September the 6th, I believe, announcing that we were starting card collection. And once we felt strongly about the cards we had signed, what better time?
Right. And so, Ma Mary, how have workers reacted to the coming election? I think the date is like from February 10th to the 15th or something like that.
That's
you can
correct.
Correct me. Okay, yeah. So
That's
so
correct.
how have workers in the facility reacted to the news of the election?
Well, a lot of workers are excited. Those that know the power of collective bargaining and that really understand the favoritism, the flagrant disrespect, being overlooked for positions, particularly with older workers like myself, people of color, the injustices that are just flagrant throughout Amazon in every department, not just in my home path, which is packed singles, but all over the building. And they're sick and tired. When you get sick and tired of something, it's time to do something. And a lot of them are really excited about it. They're like, yay, maybe now we can affect some change. But on the other side of the coin, Jacob, let me tell you about the slander campaign that Amazon is running. It is unfreaking believable. They're telling people all kind of misinformation. If I can be very candid with you, they're just lying to coworkers. And I get it. See, because to Amazon, they don't want a union because they lose that power and control. So they can't just change our brakes. So they can't, they can still continue to send us where they want to in the building, you know, and continue to have us be their pawns. We call Amazon the new plantation. We're just not picking cotton or chopping tobacco. We're picking packages. And it's time for this to stop. We're human beings. We deserve to be treated with respect and dignity. And when I started at Amazon 4 years ago, I started out at $15 an hour. We work for a $2 trillion company. Jeff Bezos is one of the richest people in the world. We deserve a living wage. And according to MIT in Wake County, for one parent, one child, the living wage is $41.54. So starting me out at $15 an hour doesn't even come close. Everything in most of our lives has gone up. You can just go in the grocery store. You see how much a dozen eggs or a loaf of bread costs you now? You're paying us slave wages. And we're tired of that. That's no longer going to cut it.
Yeah,
So,
you know, the eggs,
through the
the
line, and
eggs
it's time
thing.
for a change.
Exactly. And the eggs thing, I was told that the prices of eggs were going to come down. So I am very, very confused about what's going on at the grocery store right now, but we can discuss that later. I don't want to get into that. Italo, what, you know, can you talk to us a little bit more about the reaction by the company? Like what are the kinds of things that Amazon is telling people, and what is the union's response to those things?
Yeah, we could spend an hour on this, Jacob, but just a few underlying things. Like Mom Mary said, this is not a misinformation campaign. This is a campaign of lies. So what they're doing right now, since captive audience meetings, they're not able to do those anymore. What they're doing is these voluntary meetings. But these voluntary meetings, as they are essentially rounding people up across the warehouse, and essentially filing people into these like recurring meetings in both English and in Spanish. And a few things that they're saying at these meetings are, you know, they're kind of testing out what they're saying. One of the first things that they started saying was what they always say, right? Oh, this union is an outside group. Well, with us, that doesn't work, right? So we knew at that point that they were just recycling messages from other campaigns, because Cause is an independent worker-led union. Like, what does that mean? That we, the Amazon associates, are everything from the president to the secretary to the treasurer to the vice president, right? So that we countered it immediately, and then they started taking that message down. Another thing that they were saying is they're lying pretty much and saying that we are going to take away your benefits. They're openly saying this. They're saying this specifically and targeting it to the Latino community. One of the things that we're seeing that Amazon's strategy is right now is they're targeting specifically Spanish speakers, because A, they know that right now there's a lot of fear going on in that community. B, they're trying to do some psychological warfare on these folks. So I'm also the chair of the Hispanic OC. So we're dealing with this literally right now. They are creating this racial tension in between Hispanics and Black folks when our union is an incredibly multicultural place. We have people from all walks of life. But what Amazon is trying to paint Cause as is a Black union that does not allow Hispanics in. That's what they're saying to our people right now. And one of the things that is just horrific about that is that Amazon is implementing this as a strategy. They are dividing their own workplace based on race, which hasn't, you know, I hadn't really seen before. We have been united typically across racial lines, but what Amazon is doing is creating this game of identity politics. And one of the ways that we, at first, we tried to counter message that by saying, no, you know, Amazon is wrong, blah, blah, blah. That wasn't really working, because as we all know, racism is not a logical thing, right? It's an emotional thing. So people are responding based on emotion. So what we tried to do, and the message that we changed was we needed to find a bigger enemy than each other. And that came from talking to a lot of our friends in the labor movement. You know, we are independent and worker-led, but we're not isolationist, right? We want to work with everybody. And one of our great friends from the labor movement was like, you know, you have to find a bigger enemy than what they're trying to do in making you the enemies of each other. So what bigger enemy than Amazon? And that message has been working. But Jacob, they're lying about everything. They're lying about who we are. They're even lying about they're saying that we pay people's salaries out of the donations that we collect. I have my eyes on the treasury all the time. We've never paid a cent of salary to anybody. So they're just making up lies. They're starting to spread around like wildfire. And our job right now is to counter them, but it's a war in there right now. It's telling them we're outside. Yep, they're telling them that we're outsiders, but it's literally a war in there right now, Jacob. It's like a tug of war. We all leave the warehouse exhausted, but I think that it's a war that we're winning right now. We're going in there and we're making sure that they're not creating the message for us. We have the message. We've had it for 3 years. We're an independent worker-led union. We are here for you because we are you. We are RDU1 associates, and we're not going to let Amazon get away with this one.
I think your answer there kind of answered something that somebody asked in the chat. There's a fellow here from Alabama asking if you've reached out to the Bessemer folks to know what to look for. And so I don't know if you've reached out to the Bessemer people specifically with RWDSU, but it sounds like you're like you said, not isolationist. You're talking to folks from other unions. And so what about, we've talked about some of the reaction to the campaign from workers and for Amazon. What about the community and like political leaders? Are there any sort of interventions, positive or negative, from community groups or politicians in the area?
Is that for me, Jacob? Or
yes. Yeah.
I don't know if you would agree, Ma Mary, but politicians, we haven't really had too much of support, which we don't really mind. You know, we have we're we're worried about the folks inside. But you know, we haven't really had too many folks. I think Wiley Nickel, who used to be a congressman, reached out at some point. I know, of course, Senator Bernie Sanders welcomed us in DC back in June, so that was big. But other than that, with local support, we haven't really had much. We do live in North Carolina, so it doesn't matter if you're, you know, Democrat or Republican. I think a lot of people want to stay away from it. So that has been an issue. But when it comes to community groups, we have had a lot of support. I mean, we're talking Black Workers for Justice, the Southern Workers Assembly, local Teamsters. We have rank and file Teamsters that are helping us out. You know, the Teachers Union, you know, the sanitation workers of the city of Durham, who we want to shout out, who, by the way, last year they went on strike, and it's illegal to strike as a government employee in the state of North Carolina. So
They did.
incredibly courageous people, and they won their pay increase. So the labor movement right now in North Carolina is popping off, but it's very different, right, than labor movements and all over the nation, because of the laws that we're under, and because we don't really have a culture of labor in North Carolina. But what we're seeing really are workers rising up, the people themselves that are touching the soil, that are cleaning out the trash, that are packing your packages. We are deciding, hey, we're going to do this ourselves, man. If you work in a workplace of 50 people, all we need is 26. So, you know, that's what we tell everybody. You don't have to wait for somebody to come and save you. You can be your own savior. You can start your own union. So we've been seeing all of these groups pop up, and you know, the Fruit of Labor Worker Center as well. I mean, we've had incredible support from our community, and we're just blessed to live in the state, really, that we have so much community support.
That's great to hear. Ma Mary, how, you know, Idolo talked to some of this, but how are you feeling about your chances come, you know, February 15th?
I'm feeling real good about them and excited about them. Like Idolo said, we've had great community support. More people, even our co-workers, are stepping up. And a lot of people, because of where we are in North Carolina, which is only second to South Carolina, and it's a right to work state, is least likely to organize. And you know, Jacob, one thing I tell my coworkers, this is 2024, right? So look around you. Name me a place that doesn't have a union. The postal workers have a union. Teachers have a union. The sanitation workers have a union. The fire department has a union. Even UPS has a union right across the street from RDU1. And one of the lies that Amazon was telling people, our coworkers, is that we make more money than they do. And we don't. But that's another smear tactic. So if all these places in your reality right now in North Carolina have unions, why don't we deserve to have one? Think about that for a minute. And the only power that rank and file people have, anybody that punches a clock anywhere, I don't care if it's at Burger King, McDonald's, Waffle House, the only power you have is collective bargaining. Other than that, your boss can do whatever they want to with you. And I tell people also, I wouldn't be afraid to join cause. Right now, I would be more afraid of what's Amazon going to do next. Because right now, they've got all the power, all the control. They could fire half of us tomorrow without just cause.
Right.
So what recourse would you have if you don't have a union? So there's lots of things to get people to thinking, you know, that they didn't know about before.
As we're wrapping up here, the Amazon Labor Union, an independent union that started at Staten Island in New York, recently affiliated with the Teamsters. I'm sure those conversations have come up. That question has come up about your union's thoughts about affiliation with the Teamsters in the event of a win or a loss, really. I mean, we've seen the Kentucky Amazon Labor Union, which has not won a union election yet. They have also affiliated with the Teamsters. How are y'all approaching those conversations about affiliating or not affiliating with the Teamsters, Mary?
And I'm sorry, I forgot because you did mention where you asked the question about Bessemer and about JFK. We have been, as a matter of fact, JFK is the reason we started this. We watched them get to an election. And I had the privilege of going to Cuba last year before now. And I met the Fantastic Four, Chris Smiles, Jason Flowers, Gerald Bryson, and Derek Palmer. I haven't met Bates in person, have been on several calls like this with her, but we watched those campaigns closely. And what we found, Amazon uses the same playbook, whether it's Bessemer, whether it's New York, whether it's in California. And we went to labor notes. Oh my God, I can't tell you the number of Amazon associates that were at labor notes that had the same gripes and grievances that us right here in North Carolina have. And when you can unite and stay together, that's more power than Amazon can stand. But it takes all of us, hourly employees fighting the good fight against a behemoth like Amazon. And that's what we're doing, and we're not stopping here. I feel real good about the election. Of course, I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't predict the outcome, but I feel real confident that we're going to win.
And then just really quickly,
and there hasn't been, the Teamsters are helping us, and a lot of unions like USSW, SWA, because we're all fighting for the rights of workers. Doesn't matter what label you put on it. Teamsters, SWA, UE 150, we're all fighting for the betterment of workers. And that we can agree on. And when we agree on that, we all support each other.
Exactly. And so, Italo, last question here. What message would you have for Amazon workers that are in places that don't have active union campaigns yet?
Start. Do it. We, Mom Mary, Rev Ryan, myself, all of the people that started from the very beginning, none of us had labor organizing experience. Mom Mary, I think you served in a union before, but I mean, that's the extent of it. You just got to start. You got to go. There's nobody coming to save you. If you're the one that is being beaten down, and I know you are as an Amazon worker, if you feel that you have no voice, if you're working for one of the greatest corporate empires in the history of the world, you deserve better. We, when we tell people, we make 19, 20 bucks an hour, and many people that don't work at a working class job will roll their eyes and they'll be like, oh, wow, you're asking for so much. I would ask that person to work 1 week on 20 bucks an hour and then come back and tell us that that's too much. We're in 2025, people. This is 20 bucks an hour does not go far at all. We have people that we work with that park in the parking lot very far away, and that's their house. That's where they live. That's where they retreat to at the end of the day and go to sleep. We have people that work 2 jobs, and I'm talking people that are in our union who work 2-3 jobs. That shouldn't be happening when we're working for one of the greatest corporate empires in the history of the world. That shouldn't be happening when you have Mr. Bezos who is sending himself into space. I don't have an issue with that. He can do whatever he wants, but pay your workers fairly. And all we're asking for here is to sit down in a table with our employers like adults. So if you work at an Amazon facility, organize. And you're not going to be alone, because as Mom Mary was saying, and we can't divulge too much, Jacob, as you can understand, but all I'm going to say is that we are no longer just a bunch of little fulfillment centers and delivery stations all over the nation. We are now a continental movement. And I'm not going to divulge too much about that, because these conversations that are being had in a very strategic fashion. But we are now a continental movement. And one of the things that we keep hearing all the time, right, and that we agree with, is we need to have one big union for Amazon workers. But it doesn't matter what label that is. It doesn't matter, this affiliation or nothing type of thing. We can come together tomorrow into a great league of Amazonians. And who knows if that's not already happening? You know what I mean? So I do think that Seattle should be scared. And I think especially Mr. Zapolsky, who I'm going to call out right now, David Zapolsky, he sits in front of on top of his skyscraper in Seattle. He is the signature that we need. We don't care about anybody else. Mr. Zapolsky, come down, parlay, negotiate, and this will all be over.
Mary Hill, Vice President of CAUSE, Idolo Medallas Marzano, Secretary of CAUSE, also Chair of the Hispanic Organizing Committee. Thank you both so much for your time this morning. Really appreciate it. Best of luck in February. We'll keep an eye on it and look forward to having you back after you win your union.
Thank you. Thank you, Jacob.
All right. We're going to take a break, folks. We'll be right back to talk about Trump's assault on the federal workforce and what federal workers need to do about it. Stay tuned. The Laborers International Union of North America, LIUNA Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama local workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact April at our training center to start the process at 256-904-1753. No experience is needed. We offer free training, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is our mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power. The Valley Labor Report is also supported by the Communication Workers of America. Learn more at cwa-union.org.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by the United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agricultural Implement Workers of America, better known as the UAW. They are one of the largest and most diverse unions in North America, with members in virtually every sector of the economy. UAW-represented workplaces range from multinational corporations, small manufacturers, and state and local governments, to colleges and universities, hospitals, and private nonprofit organizations. The UAW has more than 400,000 active members and more than 580,000 retired members in the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico. You can learn more about the UAW and join at uaw.org. The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by Labor Notes. Labor Notes is a media and organizing project that has been the voice of union activists who want to put the movement back in the labor movement since 1979. You can learn more about Labor Notes at labornotes.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Unite Here is also a supporter of the Valley Labor Report. They are a labor union that represents 300,000 working people across Canada and the United States. Their members work in the hotel, gaming, food service, manufacturing, textile, distribution, laundry, transportation, and airport industries. You can learn more about Unite Here at unitehere.org.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
The largest union talk radio program in the South. This is the Valley Labor Report on 6 terrestrial radio stations in 4 states across the South. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. If you have anything to add, you can give us a call. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. We'll go ahead and open the lines up now and take calls when we start the second half of the program. I've got a message to feds, folks, to the good ones, to federal workers. So, everybody knows that Donald Trump issued a flurry of executive orders during his first week in office, many of them direct attacks on federal employees based on lies. We're going to go through them all in some level of detail, but just in case you're hearing this on the radio right now and you're not going to be able to catch the rest of the segment, here is the rub. If you are unionized, if you are in a unionized bargaining unit, and you have questions, you need to talk to your union. Find out who your union steward is. Find out who your local president is and talk to them. Do not just believe whatever management tells you about what they can and can't do or about how they're going to implement these executive orders. Talk to your union. Further, it is imperative that you join your union if you are not already a member. And you need to get active. All of these executive orders, their implementation has to be negotiated in union workplaces. Management can't just come in and carte blanche make these changes. In fact, at least one agency has already rolled back return to office orders because of the union. The Department of Health and Human Services has walked back previously issued return to office orders for unionized staff because the staff has a collective bargaining agreement in place, and your union will need people to help support them during this process. Your union is going to, think about here in Huntsville. We have 3 federal unions, basically, but one of them, AFGE, represents the vast majority of union workers. AFGE represents like 10,000 workers in nearly 30 bargaining units.
From the Collins Studio web interface.
Now, most of those are not going to be bargaining units where telework is even available at all. You know, AFGE represents here in Huntsville people that work at the commissary, for instance, or the VA's office, or the Defense Health Agency, you know, nurses and doctors and things like this, right? Firefighters, right? So those people can't telework. But for probably about half of the agencies, there's some level of telework that is going to be attempted to be revoked by management. And so your union needs your help in negotiating the implementation of these executive orders. Your union can't do it alone. So you need to join the union. You need to get active, but also your dues are going to go to pay for the legal support that you need, as some of these unlawful executive orders, like Schedule F, are fought in the courts. The lawyers that unions hire are not free. We have to pay them, and your dues are what pays those attorneys. If you're in a union workplace, you need to make sure that you are a member of the union. You need to contact your union for any questions that you have, and you need to ask your union how you can help. Okay? And if your federal workplace is not unionized, you need to get unionized. The biggest federal employee unions are the American Federation of Government Employees, AFGE, the National Federation of Federal Employees, NIFE, the National Treasury Employees Union, NTEU, the National Association of Government Employees, an SEIU affiliate, NAGE, and the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers. You can look all of those up and find out how to contact them online. There are others, but those are going to be the ones that you want to reach out to first. You can also reach out to the Federal Unionists Network at federalunionists.net. If you have any questions, that they are a loose coalition, informal coalition of federal workers who are dedicated to supporting each other and answering each other's questions during this difficult time. They might be able to help, as well as the Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee, which you can reach out at workerorganizing.org. The Emergency Workplace Organizing Committee is a project of DSA and UE to help people during the first steps of a union campaign. They've been very effective, and so you should reach out to them if you're in a non-union federal workplace and you want to get organized. Okay, so there's basically the rub. And I want to help you understand why they're doing this, why they are doing these attacks on federal workers. And it's going to sound hyperbolic, but it's true. The reason is that they hate you, right? Okay? These people hate you. Just look at the person that they want to head the Office of Management and Budget, which is basically the agency responsible for leading the other agencies. Russ Vought, a key architect of Project 2025, which I was told that Donald Trump denounced, and that we all had to pretend it was some Democrat conspiracy theory to say that Project 2025 is a problem and is what Donald Trump wants to do. I was told that we had to pretend that wasn't the case. Well, now the pretending is over. Russ Vought has been nominated to head the Office of Management and Budget, which is the agency responsible for leading the other federal agencies, who, by the way, also refused in his Senate confirmation hearing last week to confirm that he would follow the law and expend funds for the purposes that Congress appropriated them for. He would not commit to expending funds in the way that Congress appropriated. Okay, but I'm getting off track. He hates you. In speeches over the last 2 years that have been uncovered by ProPublica, he said that he wants to put federal employees, quote, in trauma, to the point that they no longer want to go to work. Here's a quote: "We want the bureaucrats to be traumatically affected. When they wake up in the morning, we want them to not want to go to work because they are increasingly viewed as the villains. We want their funding to be shut down so that the EPA can't do all of their rules against our energy industry because they have no bandwidth financially to do so. They don't believe that we should have an environmental protection agency. They don't believe we should have a Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They don't believe that we should have a Federal Trade Commission, an Office of Safety and Health Administration, a Mine Safety and Health Administration. I'm sorry, OSHA is Occupational Safety and Health Administration. They don't believe that we should have a DOL, Department of Labor, that regulates child labor. They certainly don't believe that we should have an Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. They don't believe that we should have a post office. They want to privatize Veterans Affairs. It's all about making somebody besides you a little bit richer. It's so that people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos can add a zero to their bank accounts. That is why they're doing all of this. And I want to go through some of these executive orders. The first one is the hiring freeze. The rationale, obviously, behind the hiring freeze is that there's just too many freaking federal workers. The reality, as AFGE said in their press releases, is that there is no legitimate rationale for slashing the size of the federal workforce. the number of federal workers has grown by roughly 6% over the past 50 years, while the U.S. population served by the federal government has increased by 57%. 57%. Many federal agencies, like the Social Security Administration, are at their lowest staffing level in 50 years, doing more work for more people with less people. Meanwhile, again, as AFGE points out, spending on the vast shadow workforce of federal contractors has ballooned to account for more than 11% of the federal budget, nearly $760 billion annually, while just 4% of the budget goes to pay federal workers. If you cut every single federal government job, you would only save 4.3% of the budget. Okay? So there's no legitimate rationale for this hiring freeze. And in situations like this, where you are trying to make it so that people don't want to come into work, what's going to happen is the people who are occupying these positions, who are the best at their jobs, the ones who have options, the ones who have marketable skills, the ones who can leave and get a better paying job, will do that, and you will be left with only the people who basically have no other options. And so then they're going to be able to turn around and say, look at how ineffective the federal government is. Now we need to privatize it, and we need to give it to Jeff Bezos so that he can make a bunch of money off of it. In addition to the hiring freeze, Trump has also paused funding to medical research, meaning that folks volunteering for potentially life-saving cancer medicine trials will not be able to get access. The United Auto Workers, which represents 5,000 fellows at the National Institute of Health, has said these include a communications blackout, canceling all meetings, a travel ban for employees, strict limitations on spending research funds, and a complete hiring freeze. UAW 2750 members are researchers who work at NIH facilities in Maryland and in other states, and their research addresses the nation's most pressing medical and public health issues, including fighting cancer, infectious disease, Alzheimer's disease, and much more. These freezes are already causing research at the NIH to grind to a halt. The Trump administration is also preventing the NIH from processing research grant proposals that fund research at universities across the country. Any delays in research progress will have impacts on the country and for the American economy, and these restrictions represent a serious public health risk as the threat of avian flu and other deadly diseases continue to rise. Some pretty broad exemptions to the hiring freeze have been made at this point, as the government executive reports that with new exemptions, only about half of job openings in the government will now be affected. They say that the Defense Department is so far exempting all of its civilian positions from the freeze. Those exemptions, as well as the carve-outs for positions related to distribution of benefits to veterans, Medicare recipients, and Social Security recipients, will allow large swaths of the federal government to continue hiring. In guidance on the freeze, the Office of Personnel Management, Matthew Veith and Charles Ezel, the acting directors of the Office of Management and Budget and the Office of Personnel Management, respectively, informed agency heads they could exempt any position tied to, quote, essential activities that protect life and property, similar to those exempted during government shutdowns. In recent shutdown plans during the Biden administration, agencies plan to require about 1.4 million or 66% of federal employees to stay on the job during a funding lapse. So there's some of this that has been being rolled back already because of the devastating impacts that it has the potential to cause. There was one right-wing, personality on Twitter who was talking about how his wife had her job position recalled as a nurse at the VA. Like, she had gotten hired on to be a nurse at the VA, and it was recalled, that offer. And so some of that has been rolled back, but there's still a lot of really big issues, like at the National Institute of Health. Another one is these return to office orders. Of course, you have the return to office order, which, again, it is important to note, it cannot be enforced right now if you are in a union bargaining unit. If your federal workplace is unionized, your management cannot enforce return to the office. And the federal government is recognizing that. Here's language from a new memo to supervisors at Health and Human Services. Quote, supervisors should not begin discussions around the return to in-person work with bargaining unit employees until HHS fulfills its collective bargaining obligations. Okay? So if you are in a union workplace in the federal government and your supervisor is telling you that you have to be back in the office 5 days a week, you need to talk to your union and they will make some heads roll. Okay? But the return to office executive order is based on lies. It's based on lies. Here are some of them. Senator Joni Ernst says we only have 6% of our federal workforce actually going into work every single day. The fact of the matter is 54% of federal workers work completely in person at jobs that require them to be on site every single day. Only 10% of civilian federal personnel are in fully remote positions. Among the subset of federal workers who are telework but not remote work eligible, 61.2% of working hours are spent in person. Here's another myth. If you exclude security guards and maintenance personnel, the number of government workers who show up in person and do 40 hours of work a week is closer to 1%. Fact. Among those federal workers who are eligible for telework, more than half of regular working hours are spent in person. Another myth. Nearly 1/3 of federal workers are entirely remote. Again, 10%. 10% of federal workers are entirely remote. It's just insane. Excluding fully remote eligible workers who do not have an in-person work site, federal workers are in the office for 79.4% of their working hours. Here's another myth from Senator Joni Ernst. Service backlogs and delays, unanswered phone calls and emails, and no-show appointments are harming the health, lives, and aspirations of Americans. Fact. Telework both increases employee engagement and helps recruit and retain workers who provide vital public services to the American people. It is going to be more difficult to retain and recruit workers if you do not offer them telework. Because private sector workers are teleworking more than their federal counterparts. 22% of federal workers usually teleworked in 2022, compared to 25% of those in the private sector. Among some occupations, like in computer and mathematical occupations, federal employees are much less likely to telework than their private sector counterparts, 37% for federal employees and 56% for private sector workers. It's all just to attack federal workers because they hate them. I'm going to put a pause on this for a segment and get to our sponsored segment of Boss Watch, and then we're going to finish this message to federal workers in the second half of our program in overtime. But I got to get to this because it's sponsored. So this segment of Boss Watch, Union Busters, covering national updates, is sponsored by Labor Lab. Labor Lab is an employer watchdog organization. They are committed to safeguarding the right to organize through unions, collective bargaining, and mutual aid. They do this by combing through reports that union busters are required to file with the Department of Labor. The first one is Quesos La Ricura in Hicksville, New York, hired LRI Consulting Services for $425 an hour. There was no NLRB case found for this. Environmental Noise Control in Gardena, California, hired Labor Management Associates for $325 an hour. No NLRB case was found for them. It appears that the business license for this union-busting firm may be expired, but despite not having an active business license, this firm has been contracted by dozens of companies, including big names like the Hershey Company. Farmer companies in Rancho Cordova, California, hired Labor Consulting Group for $395 an hour. The election was lost by the union. And Environmental Air Systems in High Point, North Carolina, hired Labor Consulting Group for $425 an hour. That election was also lost by the union. In addition, the following filings were amended Grocery Delivery E-Services USA, doing business as HelloFresh, hired Logic Labor Relations, who subcontracted the Tally Consultancy. Logic Labor Relations charged $3,500 a day, of which $2,626 a day was given to the Tally Consultancy. Amazon DII4 hired Larry Wold, who added his compensation rate of $250 an hour. And Amazon DCH8 hired Alfred Roger Lacey, who had added his compensation rate of $2,000 per day. We've got no time for plugs here. We're going to get to them in the second half of the show. Make sure you stay tuned. If you're just listening to us on the radio, you can find us online at YouTube and Facebook at The Valley Labor Report. If you don't hang out with us for the second half of the show, we really appreciate your time. You should, though. We're going to be talking to Harvey J.K. about the legacy of Jimmy Carter and neoliberalism. Lots of great stuff coming up on the second half of the show. But if you don't hang out with us there, we'll see you next week. All right, folks, we're off the radio now. Appreciate everybody tuning in and staying tuned. We're going to take a break really quick. Going to come back with the second half of the show and finish going through our discussion of these executive orders from Donald Trump that are attacking federal workers. Stay tuned.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Folks, welcome back. My name is Jacob Morrison. You are still listening to the Valley Labor Report. This is the second half of the program, which we call Overtime. Appreciate y'all tuning in. We got a great overtime lined up for you today. We have historian Harvey J. Kaye on to talk about Carter's legacy. Going to be a great segment there. We'll take your calls at 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. Also going to be talking about this meteorologist in Minnesota who was fired for criticizing the richest man in the world. Really insane stuff that I am shocked because I'm a baby brain. I have been totally shocked by the free speech warriors not coming out in support of this fired meteorologist who has been canceled for criticizing one of the most powerful people in the world. I'm shocked because I thought they were serious about their commitments to free speech, and my brain is totally smooth. So going to talk some more about that. But first up here, let's finish this with these attacks that Donald Trump is putting out on federal workers. Another really big one is Schedule F. And so what this is we know, or at least it makes sense, that there are going to be political appointees that the president gets to appoint outside of the merit system to basically push for his agenda in the federal government, right? And that makes sense, and that's always been the case. We've always had political appointees. Of course you have at the top, the secretaries of these departments and stuff, but you've got just a whole consortium of these types, like thousands of political appointees in the civil service working for the federal government already. And what Donald Trump wants to do is he wants to significantly expand, potentially by as much as a couple of 100,000 jobs, to turn them into political appointees. He wants to really, frankly, completely decimate the idea of a civil service based on competence and merit rather than political patronage and loyalty tests to the president rather than the Constitution. Donald Trump doesn't think that a few thousand political appointees in the government is enough. This order, like I said, would create as many as a few 100,000 political appointees. And if you want to talk about draining the swamp, this is literally the opposite of that. And it will lead to a degradation of government services. Obviously, NTEU, National Treasury Employees Union, is suing over Schedule F. FedScoop reports that the lawsuit over Schedule F focuses on legislation Congress has enacted regarding federal employment, including establishing, quote, that most federal government jobs be in the merit-based competitive service, and, quote, most federal employees have due process rights if their agency employer wants to remove them from employment. Trump's executive order, the union argued, is not what Congress intended because it attempts to divest federal employees of these due process rights. The Monday order, reinstating Trump's previous establishment of his original Schedule F with some slight changes, included renaming it the Schedule Policy Career. That order is aimed at reclassifying certain employees who are part of the federal civilian workforce and, quote, policy influencing positions as at-will employees, making them easier to dismiss. NTEU National President Doreen Greenwald said in a Tuesday statement that the order is, quote, a dangerous step backward to a political spoils system that Congress expressly rejected 142 years ago, which is why we are suing to have the order declared unlawful, end quote. In addition to declaring the order unlawful, the union also asked the courts to enjoin Trump from enforcing it and enjoin other government officials from applying with it. Just to give you an idea of the scope of this, the Office of Management and Budget, when they previously issued a Schedule F order, they attempted to classify 88% of staff at the Office of Management and Budget as political appointees. So that's the kind of stuff that you could be looking at from this, I would argue, illegal executive order. and we'll wrap up on the DEI stuff. And, longtime listeners of the show will know that we have been critical of some parts of these corporatized and frankly bastardized DEI sorts of efforts as basically a cover-up for corporations to try to give themselves brownie points and puff pieces on MSNBC and stuff like that without actually doing anything to support underserved communities. I mean, right now, Costco is just such a good example of the things that we have been critical of in the quote DEI space, right? They are right now making a big deal about, look at how great a company we are because we are keeping our DEI programs at the same time that they are refusing to seriously negotiate with the Teamsters, who represent 18,000 Costco workers nationwide, even as last year they made record profits, $7.4 billion in profits. And they are refusing to negotiate seriously with the Teamsters. They are also union busting in places where the Teamsters are trying to organize more Costco workers. They are trying to dissuade workers from joining the union. And so, look, this Robin DiAngelo white fragility stuff, I've always thought that was bad. And you can check the record on that, okay? And I continue to think that that's bad. And I have no doubt that there are some portions of that there are some similar programs in the federal government that it would not be bad to eliminate. But, one, for workers who were hired in DEI offices that are in jobs that are now no longer available because of this executive order, it is only right that they be hired in some other post that they are qualified for, and I believe that our unions will fight for that. I mean, that's just basic decency. They applied to these positions in good faith to serve the American people, and whether or not you believe that job is the best allocation of our money or not, they did that and they were hired, and I believe it is only right that the government, as an employer, make a place for them or put them in an available place where they can continue to serve the American people. And two, even as I have all these caveats and throat clearing about how I've been critical of DEI programs, and I think that a lot of it is just dressing to make employers look better, there's a lot of important stuff that the government does need to do to specifically address the needs of marginalized communities. I mean, one of the effects of this executive order is that anything that was tied to, quote, environmental justice is now reportedly on the chopping block. And folks, communities of color have historically been more likely to face pollution, etc., than white communities, and that is not an accident. If we cannot address that as a government, that's a problem, and that will make a real material difference, which is what I care about, for the worse in the lives of many families. And same with highways. Buttigieg talked about the issues of racism in road constructions, and conservatives mocked it, but you can only do that if you literally don't know anything about the history of the construction of highways in the United States. It completely destroyed several thriving black communities all across the country, and we should be able to say that in the government today, and we should be able to create programs to specifically address harms that the government caused. Additionally, we need to be purposeful in recruitment, right? If a government, if the government has a position that is open, and even if there is no express discrimination and the hiring managers do not have any sorts of, ill will, and if there's a black person that applies, they're not going to discriminate against them and they might hire them or whatever. And if all that is true, but you only apply to, let's say, just in Huntsville, there are several colleges in Huntsville. It's frankly remarkable how many colleges there are in Huntsville. You only send notice of the application to UAH or to Drake or Calhoun, which are all majority. I think Drake is majority white. I'm not totally sure. But let's just say Calhoun and UAH. Those are majority white colleges. If you only send the applications to those and you don't send them to Alabama A&M or Oakwood University,
historically black colleges and universities, that is like basically discrimination, because you are going to decrease the pool of available applicants. And that is one of the things that people in these DEI offices have done. They have been purposeful in making sure that recruitments are being sent out to black and other communities and not just white communities, right? DEIA offices, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility offices, are also responsible for ensuring that disabled veterans and others have proper accommodation so that they can perform their jobs, right? And so all of these things are real and important that are being these are the baby that are being thrown out with the bathwater of some of the potentially problematic versions of DEI that have gone on. And the people that it's just so frustrating seeing people who don't know anything about actually what happens in these offices celebrating it and not knowing actually what the results are going to be. And also, it is extremely funny that the rationale for the elimination of the DEIA offices are blah, blah, blah. We want to make sure that we hire people based on merit. We want to hire people based on merit rather than skin color or whatever the heck. And also, literally the same day, they issued an executive order so that they could hire tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people based on political allegiance rather than merit, right? That wasn't an accident that I juxtaposed Schedule F with the DEI stuff, okay? So, it's just such a farce, and you are totally smooth-brained if you believe that what they actually care about is making sure that people are hired based on merit rather than skin color or whatever. That's obviously not what they care about. What they care about is just degrading the quality of jobs in the federal government and doing everything that they can to get their lackeys into the government.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I wanted to just kind of extend on that point you're making about the material impact, because, and I think Sam Sachs made this point on Means Morning News yesterday, but these actions from the Trump administration, these attacks on DEI and the offices and the workers involved, the programs, will have a worse material impact than anything these folks can point to DEI itself having on working class people, right? And remember that the working class is the most diverse class, right? Working class folks, by and large, are much more diverse than the upper class in our society. So when we talk about working class people, we're often talking about black and brown folks. We're talking about Asian folks and Hispanic folks and women and people with disabilities. And these are all folks that are going to be negatively impacted by these programs being cut, these offices being attacked, these workers being laid off, or the attempts to lay them off. But that's my experience with it. I've encountered DEI type programs out in professional settings, out in workplaces. I've attended workshops in that vein, and you take what you want out of it. In my experience, the only people who seem deeply offended by it are the most mediocre ass white folks you can run into, just to be blunt with it. It's people who feel like they have been passed over because of their white skin and have some sort of grudge about that. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe Project 2025 was pretty explicit in going down that road, that they wanted to argue DEI was a discrimination against white folks. Mm-hmm. And, that's just totally ridiculous. It's just totally ridiculous. And I don't know how to really wrestle with the fact that there are folks who believe that. I'd be curious to hear the explanation and the logic behind it. I don't know if there is much, but it's a real concern, because I think it's going to negatively impact the entire workforce. It's not just, the racial minorities and marginalized groups who are going to be negatively impacted. It's everybody. It sets a dangerous precedent. And, there is benefit from diversity and equity and inclusion. I don't know why that's suddenly controversial. These programs were not particularly controversial up until pretty recently, right? I mean, sure, you've always had folks griping about it, but they've become a political buzzword. It's become a political buzzword. It's I think, to your point earlier, a lot of people who are talking about it don't actually know what it is, and what it is that they're mad about, and what it is that they're attacking. Because, I would love to see evidence that there's some, dastardly plots behind all this. The DEI offices are having some negative impact on people. If that can be proven, I'm open to hear it, but I've just never encountered that. I mean, at most, it's some, human resources kind of mixed with neoliberal claptrap. I get it. It's not all great, but these kind of things vary in quality anyway. Any kind of training, right, any kind of office, any kind of initiative, right? It's all going to vary in quality. So if you want me to believe there's been some bad workshops offered, some bad consultants hired over the years, I can believe that. But to think that this is some nefarious plot against white people, I think is just absurd. It's just absurd. And it's a shame that federal workers, that any working class people are going to have to deal with negative consequences for this kind of BS.
And the attack on federal workers is the opening salvo in the attack on all workers and the degradation of working conditions across the economy. We saw that with Ronald Reagan and the firing of the PATCO strikers in the 80s. That signaled to the private sector that it is open war on organized workers, right? And this is going to be interpreted as in a similar way. Now, I think the return to office stuff, I think that more people out in the private sector and even within the government, it is just ideological freaks who are so bent out of shape about the telework stuff. I think that most people, even in business, recognize the value of telework and that I don't think that's going anywhere, at least in the private sector. But, some of this other stuff, degradation of working conditions, is definitely going to be, done in the private sector. And it's really, really, really gross. And seeing people fall for it is really gross. This is a comment that's kind of related to this. Mark in the chat says, Doge can cut out $2 trillion in government spending each year, which will turn the tide of government spending so the government will take in more than it spends. Mark, you need to, you're really baby braining on me right now, and you need to go back and check the talking points that you're supposed to have, because even Elon Musk is not going out there with the lie that it's even possible to cut $2 trillion from the federal budget without, at least, it's anything is physically possible, but you would have such enormous and unpopular cuts to services for the American public that there's no way that would happen, because the discretionary budget is only something like $1.7 trillion. Okay. So if you cut the entire discretionary budget, which is everything except Social Security, Medicare, and everything besides Social Security and Medicare and those types of programs, that's only $1.7 trillion. You would have to start eating into Social Security and Medicare, which they would like to do, but the American public is not going to stand for it. And so Elon Musk has even walked that back and said, well, maybe we can get 1 trillion. Maybe he said 1 trillion would be on the high end of what he would consider 1 trillion a success. Okay. So you need to go back and kind of see what your talking points are supposed to be, because you've got the old ones.
Yeah, I also don't think it's a given that such an amount has to be cut from the federal government budget. Right. This is a tired talking point that goes back, at this point, I guess over a century, about government spending and the government's spending too much. Oh no, the government's spending too much. And it's like, y'all, I mean, United States dollar is the global reserve currency, at least for the time being. The United States prints its own money. As of yet, we haven't had a crisis over this federal spending. I mean, we can talk about there's too much spending in certain areas, of course, but the one area they don't want to talk about is war and empire and the military industrial complex and the amount of money they spend building bombs to blow up people in our names halfway across the globe. And that's a little bit controversial, I know, but that's the reality. And they don't want to talk about that kind of spending. They want more of that kind of spending.
Exactly.
They want more spending on all sorts of nonsense, it sounds like. So I'm just not buying it. And I think it's important in these kind of environments that we have solidarity with other working people, right? Do not get fooled or divided or distracted by some of this nonsense. I think the fact that there was a flurry of executive orders is intentional, right? There's intent in keeping us confused and divided and distracted, and getting people pitted against each other by race. To call back to the Amazon interview we had in the main show, right? Amazon is doing that right now in that warehouse to try to divide working people. The politicians do that at a much larger scale. The media has its role in that, and various media figures, right? So we have to be really cognizant of that threat. Because it's our solidarity that can help us deal with these sort of threats coming from the government, from the billionaires, whoever it may be. So it's important, those of us who don't work in the federal government, that we show up in solidarity for our brothers and sisters who are working in these positions. And to your point, I really, really believe this is the time to get organized, to join your union, to get active. If you've never been active before, now is the time to do it. If you're already active, think about who you can bring into the movement. Who else can you talk to? Who else have we not tapped into? Think about what can we do more strategically. If you're already active, what can we be better at doing so that we're having more of an impact? Consider running for union office. If you've never done it before, it's something you should consider. We need people to serve in offices. We need people to serve as stewards. We need people to recruit new members, to represent members in disciplinary hearings, to organize politically and legislatively, right? All of these things are necessary. So
okay, you got to close the door. I can't talk.
So yeah, just wanted to throw that in there, and appreciate your response and giving a message to federal workers. I know that's more your wheelhouse than mine, but tough times ahead, and solidarity is going to be our best resource.
Right. And 1005 in the chat says, or perhaps, Mark, the government could simply tax the rich at the rate that they tax us. Politicians are essentially our secretaries. And Mark comes back saying that the top 1% pay almost 50% of all taxes. Don't you think they pay enough? And that's only because the top 1% make most of the money. The top 1% do pay a lower effective tax rate. I mean, you've heard of the Warren loophole. He pays less, a lower effective tax rate than his secretary. And so, if you're blind to that reality, it's really difficult to kind of know what to do or where to go with the conversation.
I don't think there ought to be such a thing as a billionaire, personally, but that's another conversation.
Confiscatory taxes. Once you've hit $1 billion, you don't get any more money. That's my view. We're going to go to Harvey JK here in just a moment. Really quick, we've got a caller on the line. Have a couple, 60 seconds, 714 area code. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Good morning. Buenos dias to everybody. Jose Francisco Negrete calling from Anaheim, California, 92805. I'm part of Teamster Mobilize. There's a couple of things I would like to discuss. One, automation and UPS is a big problem. And the general president is correct. There's language that talks about automation, Article 6, Section 4, but that article is not being addressed. UPS is just clearly running through it with all these automations happening in Grande Vista, Commerce City, Colorado, Oklahoma City, Swan Island, and Portland. So we just need to enforce that language and you guys were talking about Trump and and we just see what's happening right now with these immigration raids happening in several U.S. cities. I was listening to my General President's podcast, Better Bad Ideas, with Sean O'Brien, and he had Senator Josh Hawley on, and he discussed immigration, and he was just right-wing talking points. Nobody's protecting undocumented workers that are criminals. Undocumented workers are not stealing jobs. But he gets on his podcast and he says these things. And we had a caller a couple of weeks ago complain about and rightfully so, talk about how the left just gives them carte blanche to say whatever and doesn't hold them accountable. I mean, this guy's attacking. This guy does not understand the principles of international solidarity. This guy doesn't understand the principles of an injury one to injury all. We're all workers, regardless of a U.S. citizen or we're undocumented workers. We're all workers. We all should stand together. And I don't know if you guys had the RUD1 comrade. I want them to hopefully they win their election. I think it's coming up in February, I believe, mid-February. Tomorrow Teamster Mobilize is going to have a general membership meeting. So we're going to discuss this. You can go on our social medias and look for the link right there. But the link is bit.ly/TM-13. That's the link for tomorrow's meeting. We're going to discuss the Amazon strike and discuss it and listen to those that participated, either showed up to the picking line like I did, and other comrades did as well. But yes, I don't know if the RUD1 comrade has spoken yet or not.
Yeah, they were on earlier in the show, and we.
Okay, so
yeah, appreciate it, Jose. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Yep.
Yeah, appreciate the call, Jose. We got to get to Harvey, but I appreciate you lifting that up about those comments. I will be sure to check that out.
I watched it. I watched it a couple nights ago. It wasn't very good. I was hoping that he would at least just for the just to give the play act the idea of being independent and whatever, and ask Josh Hawley why he voted against confirming Lauren McFerrin at the NLRB. I figured that he would have to do that.
So he wasn't doing any tough grilling. Instead, it was more kind of playing along, that would be my concern.
It was just backpatting and that's frankly
when you have
PG way to put it,
right?
Really.
When you have as Jose said, these really devastating raids happening, and you have this just ridiculous attack on immigration, our immigrant brothers and sisters. That's really concerning. Really, really concerning. So appreciate you lifting that up.
Yeah. Harvey J. Kaye is the Ben and Joyce Rosenberg Professor of Democracy and Justice Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay, author and editor of numerous works, including Thomas Paine and the Promise of Freedom, and the Promise of America, and The Fight for the Four Freedoms, What Made FDR, and The Greatest Generation, Truly Great. Harvey, welcome back to the program. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. Can you hear us?
I'll just point out that I am now Professor Emeritus. I retired when the pandemic struck. And the second thing is I remain an active member of the American Federation of Teachers by way of the Retiree Council, just so people know, okay? It's good to see you guys. It must be a couple of years, perhaps, since we last spoke. I don't remember. But anyhow, it's good to see you guys.
It's been a minute, and appreciate you being willing to come on. You reached out to us after having listened to Chris Townsend interview with us on Jimmy Carter, and you said that there were a few other things that you wanted to add to that conversation, and so I guess we can start at the election of Jimmy Carter, and I'm interested in kind of similar to if you had a reaction similar to Chris's when Jimmy Carter came into office. Chris talked about he had a certain level of cautious optimism, like this is a normal guy, a peanut farmer from Georgia. Isn't it cool how down to earth he's seeming at the inauguration and stuff like that? Maybe this will be, maybe he'll be a good president for workers and normal Americans. Did you share that reaction when Jimmy Carter was elected?
I did not, in fact.
Wow, Harvey is even more jaded than Chris. That's pretty bleak. I'm going to have to talk to Chris about that and tell him that he's being shown up.
No, actually, he was not alone. I mean, the broad swath of folks from labor to the environmentalists and the consumer rights people, everyone thought Carter might well be a successful, in quotes, though I'm not sure they used it at the time. Then they said liberal. Now they would have said progressive president. But here's the thing. People weren't quite aware of where he came from. How was it that the governor of Georgia is all of a sudden a major national figure in the Democratic Party? And I think it's important for all of us to know that, for a start, the 1970s, for all of the troubles of the decade, stagflation, the withdrawal from Vietnam and what that implied in the American empire, a whole host of really troubling things. It was really a lot of people talked about a crisis of democracy. And yet a lot of people were not talking about what was really happening. It was the beginning, and I'll be blunt about it, of a class war on working people and the democratic achievements of the 1930s and the 1960s. And in fact, Carter is elevated to national prominence in good part because of David Rockefeller. And David Rockefeller at that time was obviously one of the richest men in America and headed the Chase Manhattan Bank. And Rockefeller, like many other corporate and capitalist leaders, was feeling that they saw business, banks, and capital under siege from the 1960s social movements, which included not only labor, but also from the women's movement, from civil rights movement, from the youth movement, the anti-war movement, the environmental movement, consumer rights, and so on. And in 1971, he gave a speech. I believe it was to a convention of bankers, a group of bankers, in which he basically said that business is in disfavor and we have got to do something about it. And at the very same time, there was the now very famous Lewis Powell memorandum delivered to the Chamber of Commerce. Lewis Powell, being a Virginia lawyer, very prominent figure, who 2 weeks later, after delivering the memo to the Chamber of Commerce, will be nominated by Richard Nixon to the U.S. Supreme Court and, in fact, take his place on the Supreme Court. And Powell was even more direct to the Chamber of Commerce. He laid out a strategy to counter what he saw as the forces mobilizing against capital, against business. And that included, again, all of those movements from the 60s that he presumed, and many corporate leaders presumed, was going to actually become all the more of a democratic surge in the 1970s. Now, back to the Rockefeller thing. Rockefeller organized, and I mean organized, and helped underwrite the creation of something called the Trilateral Commission, which sounds like a conspiracy theory forthcoming, but it was a very open effort. They even published their report, The Crisis of Democracy, with New York University Press in 1975. And the Trilateral Commission was basically, a large corporate association of business leaders and political leaders who might at the time be out of office from Western Europe, Japan, and the United States. And the man who took charge of organizing it for Rockefeller was the big new Brzezinski, who will, of course, become Carter's National Security Council or National Security Advisor, and then Secretary of State, if I've got that in the right order. Here's the thing. There were two members of the Trilateral Commission that are worth noting in particular. One is George H.W. Bush, the Republican, and the other is Jimmy Carter, the Democrat. Okay? So what we find here in the 70s is this mobilization of corporate leaders and corporate friends, you might say, themselves coming out of politics with their own business associations. And this is the beginning, basically, of this class war. The the Trilateral Commission itself actually said that democracy was essentially a threat to capitalism. That because of the movements of the 60s, there was what happened. There was a challenge to the authority of wealth. This is all in their report, as I said, which was a public university, not public, but a public document. The university press had brought it out. And when Carter ran for president, although I didn't know of all the details at the time, and I was living in Louisiana at the time, and it didn't seem, voting in 1976 did not seem terribly important living in Louisiana, a one-party state. Okay, so in the end, I didn't vote in 76. I was convinced that Carter was not a lefty, a progressive. I wasn't even sure of his liberal credentials. I believe his own family were by no means fans of FDR. So, okay, so Carter is elected but there are expectations among environmentalists, consumer rights people, and the labor movement that this will afford an opportunity to accomplish certain things. National health care, okay, an end to Taft-Hartley Act, full employment as basically an economic, if you like, directive. And I mean, I could go on from there. The point is there were great expectations, and Chris Townsend had every reason to be cautiously optimistic, which I was not. And what happens? What ends up happening? Well, this is a time of high unemployment and a stagnant economy. And by the time, from 77 to 78, by 1978, after a year in office, Carter reveals himself to be, and I'll be very, very quick and blunt about it, the first neoliberal president. That was a term that people didn't even know at the time, but he launches what is called neoliberalism. He goes in front of the American people in 1978 in a series of speeches, and the most significant one is one in which he says this, and I quote, he spoke to the nation on the need to fight inflation and cut the government deficit instead of fighting unemployment. And then he said, we must face a time of national austerity. Now, what's the byword of neoliberalism? Austerity. So it's Carter who launches this neoliberal politics and political economy. He also says, essentially, in a speech that followed, that it was time to liberate capital, or he said probably liberate business. And the idea was to deregulate, because why? Government can't solve all our problems. This is his own words. Cannot solve all our problems. Okay, so basically we've got to saying let's turn to business and let them run free. Basically, okay. Now, what does this imply? Well, first of all, the class war is underway, and Doug Frazier, who was then the president of the UAW, who was a member of the President's Labor Management Council, this sort of group of business and labor figures who were discussing important affairs of the day, he actually sends an open letter to Carter, and he says that he is resigning from this council. Why? He says, and I'm quoting, I believe leaders of the business community have chosen to wage a one-sided class war today in this country, a war against working people, the unemployed, the poor, the minorities, the very young and the very old, and even many in the middle class of our society. I mean, so Chris what Chris said at a personal level and his observations absolutely on target. But I thought it's really important to know that Jimmy Carter paved the way to Ronald Reagan and basically moved the Democratic Party basically to neoliberalism. And the presidencies of Carter, Clinton, Obama, and to a surprisingly lesser extent, Biden, because Biden was a champion of neoliberalism for his 40 years in Congress, he actually sort of started to abandon by no means was he a left president, but he did in fact begin to do things that implied a possibility of breaking with neoliberalism. I'm not here to defend Biden. The point is, it's important for all of us to understand that this class war that we of labor have endured is 50 years. I'm not kidding, 50 years. So anyhow, those are I just wanted to put it into that kind of historical context.
Yeah, I think that is a really important historical context. Another thing that you mentioned that we didn't get into in our conversation with Chris Townsend was his appointment of Paul Volcker, I think his name was, to the Federal Reserve, and the Volcker shock and kind of Carter's response to inflation. Can you talk to us about that and how that affected how his response to inflation affected working people, and what alternatives, existed to combat inflation instead of what he ultimately did, which was, austerity and hurting people?
Well, basically, Volcker, as head of the Federal, appointed by Carter, who, by the way, Ronald Reagan kept on at the Federal Reserve. Basically, he set it up so that who would bear the burden of fighting the crisis of stagflation? Working people. So companies laid off workers, okay, accelerated their efforts to smash unions, okay. And there's something else I left out, and this is part of it. It's sort of like both ends of the decade. American business was not only under siege from below in the United States, it was actually under siege in terms of Japanese and West German industrial enterprises. They had now recovered from the devastation of World War II, and they were giving a real bit of competition to American capital. So there was, both in Britain and the United States, what came to be called a profit squeeze. Now, how do you respond to a profit squeeze? You have to cut the costs if you're not going to do remarkable innovation. And what did they do? They went out to smash labor, to bust unions, to take back the arrangements in contracts. So labor is already under siege throughout this decade. And of course, when you've got a Federal Reserve chair who's determined to drive up unemployment because companies will probably reduce their workload in light of the response by the Federal Reserve to the stagflation. And let's not forget, there later ensues the further Volcker reign in the Federal Reserve, the Reagan recession, which is all the more an opportunity to smash labor. Okay. And this really is, sort of the edges of the 70s. We used to joke about the fact the 70s were awful because of what? Bell bottoms and disco balls and all that kind of stuff. But actually, what makes the 70s horrific is the class war on labor and working people.
Right. What were some alternative paths that Carter could have taken to address the inflation crisis?
Well, you've now posed the question that I hope someday we can turn to in a separate conversation. If there's a problem in the economy, if unemployment's high and if inflation's high, we've allowed ourselves to believe, if you want to believe, the current regime and the Musk folks, that it's government spending which drives up inflation, instead of talking about the degree to which corporations will price gouge, the degree to which banking rates will be driven up by Federal Reserve officers. I mean, it's all of these kinds of things. And so what could have been done? Well, for a start, I think the kinds of things that the social movements of the day, we'll start with consumer folks, okay, regulate business all the more effectively. Back in the 60s, business was revealed to have lied repeatedly. The drug companies had lied about the significance of the drugs they were bringing onto the market, such as thalidomide, okay? Pollution they had avoided as an issue, and which leads to the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency. And moreover, of course, labor's demands, which were still based on the New Deal ideal, and that is national health care, et cetera. So if they had pursued in 1978, if the Carter and the Democrats had pursued consumer rights, regulation of business, they would have had greater say over what's going on in the corporate world. Number two, the environmental movement was not a threat and not by any means the cause of inflation. It was going to make the costs of business activity less oppressive to working people and middle class and other people. And of course, give labor a capacity to organize in the South. I mean, the big question, look, Taft-Hartley Act, amongst many other things, basically allowed Southern states to pass right-to-work laws and block labor's organizing efforts in the South, which also severely cost the advance of civil rights and basically in many ways separates civil rights and labor rights, which should never have happened. Okay. So I may not have answered your question directly, but I would say that if you're going to face a crisis, and this is what Lincoln knew and what FDR knew, if you're facing a crisis, which has become a crisis of democracy, then you have to bring about what people like to call progressive. I'd go further and say radical change. The New Deal faced a crisis of democracy and the economy at the same time. And by the time the U.S. entered the Second World War, the American economy was greatly recovered. And essentially, the labor movement had a vision coming out of the New Deal and out of the war effort of a real social democratic America. And again, as I said, I know I sent you a message. Sometime we should talk about labor's vision of the 30s, 40s, and beyond, and how every effort was made to contain and smash that vision, which is why the class war has been so successful. And even now that we see this real resurgence among working people for a desire, for an aspiration, for an ambition to organize and confront capital in the workplace and outside, we know that the labor movement at the AFL-CIO level has no vision.
Right. And so, you take a lot from the legacy of, in particular, Thomas Paine and FDR. I haven't read your book about the Four Freedoms, but I did read your book about Thomas Paine, and it was really, really interesting and a really cool piece of history that a lot of people would not know if they did not read your book. And so they should read your book about Thomas Paine and the Promise of America. But, how do you see today as Biden has left office and Trump enters office? How do you see Carter's legacy impacting the office of the presidency and what we can expect potentially from the Trump administration?
Well, I mean, let's put it this way. I saw that. I have always said to people, shock them. Look, Carter was a very sweet and a very good man in his post-presidential years. But as a president, for the sake of working people, he was awful. Right. Awful. Okay. And in essence, he empowers the neoliberalism. He empowers the Reagan presidency. Carter deregulated finance, he deregulated transportation, and he turned his back on the very things that were essential, basically, to continuing the legacy of the 30s and the 60s. So now, after these 50 years, how do I see it? I see this as literally the darkest outcome of that 50-year class war. Now, here's why. Working people are not instinctively conservative. They're instinctively eager for what back in the 19th century and the early 20th century was at least a decent American standard of living, which they believe they have a right to. Going back to the Declaration of Independence with all the flaws of the founders, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Ask yourself in 20th and 21st century terms what life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness requires. And then you'll recall 8 hours of work, 8 hours of rest, 8 hours for what we will. Now, that was a vision which actually greatly influenced FDR in the 1930s. And it was a vision that then he re-articulates in terms of what he called the four freedoms: freedom of speech, freedom of worship, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. And later, he calls for an economic Bill of Rights. So the outcome of 50 years of smashing, if you like, the memory of that vision and smashing the unions who were the carriers of that vision, well, what do you see? What have we seen for the past 50 years? Gross inequalities, and working people have gotten to the point where they're fed up with the Democrats. They're fed up with neoliberalism. And I'll go further. Look, in 2016, when we voted in 2016 here in Wisconsin, everyone assumed the Democrats, working people who generally would have voted Democratic, were going to turn out for Hillary Clinton. But what did they do? Well, they remembered Bill Clinton and NAFTA They remembered Bill Clinton and the end of the aid to families with dependent children. They remembered mass incarceration. They remembered the smashing of much of what remained of the New Deal during a Democratic president. And later, I mean, in 2016, a lot of them were just not going to vote for Hillary Clinton. Admittedly, she didn't come to Wisconsin. She didn't go to Michigan. She didn't go to Pennsylvania, which added insult to, on top of the injuries, or if you like. And she lost, even though she won, a greater share of the popular vote across the country. But she lost these three key states and the working people's votes within them. And I can tell you, I think a lot of working people are voting because they want to give the Democrats a bloody nose. That's how I view it in the most simple terms. And look, Bernie would have won in 2016. He would have won in 2020. And if he had been younger, he would have won this time. If he had decided to run. Working people back in 2016, and I could tell you this from the students I had who ultimately confessed that they voted for Trump because their parents did. These are the 18-year-olds who just came as freshmen. They would say, my parents wanted to vote for Bernie, but he wasn't the candidate, so they voted for Trump because they were angry. They were upset. These are both rural and urban voters, their parents. Sorry, if I'm sounding simplistic as a historian, it's only because I'm trying to condense because I know we don't have a lot of time.
No, I think this has been excellent. And I want to kind of pick up with where you left off here with this 50-year outcome of the neoliberal class war and the situation we're facing today with the far right being ascendant, having control over all three branches of the federal government down to many of the state and local governments, especially here in the South. I don't think it's very controversial to say that we live in an oligarchy. So,
yes.
Where does that leave us now? You mentioned Bernie would have won. Let's pick up with that. Those of us who want to see a progressive working class populist upsurge,
right.
At the very least, however you want to get into the details of that. But, we want to see another revival of the working class as an organized political and social movement. Like we saw from the 30s through the 60s, where we had this massive wave of people power that brought real material progress. So for those of us who want to see that, those of us who understand that is how we move forward, is that kind of people power, where are we left today? Where are we to make of this and where we go next?
Okay. Let me put it this way. I've been talking for now several years with, I'm not a labor leader. I'm a labor member. I'm a brother of the American Federation of Teachers. But I've said to a number of people, and I'm proud to say a good friend of mine is Sarah Nelson. And I said to her, and we've agreed, the one force that can save democracy is the labor movement, but not as it's currently configured. Okay, I mean, it's wonderful to see and hear Sean Fain. It's wonderful to see the UAW on the march. It's great to know that Amazon workers are fed up and eager to organize. It's great to know Starbucks. But here's the thing. The vast majority of folks are not organizing right now. And they need to know that there's more than that. As much as they'll say, yes, we like the idea of labor, they need to know that the cause of labor is not only in those kinds of workplaces, whether it's the higher paid UAW worker or the lower paid Amazon and especially Starbucks workers. They need to hear labor speak American. They need to hear like the likes of Sean Fain. Look, Sean McBride talking not about which party is going to do this or that for them, but what labor as a driving force can do. I mean, my hopes had been that by this time, the AFL-CIO would have been led by Sarah Nelson, not by Liz Schuler, okay? That there would have been a more dynamic, a more militant, more energetic and enthusiastic leadership, a leadership at the AFL-CIO. In the meantime, through our own unions, we're going to have to start, if you like, demanding from the local to the state and beyond that these unions not only do what they're doing. Organizing is fundamental and essential, but it's not enough. We have to start speaking of a vision which will not only sort of enhance the organizing efforts, but a vision which will attract people. Okay? I mean, look, in 1944, FDR gave a State of the Union address in which he laid out an economic bill of rights, guaranteed health care, guaranteed jobs with a living wage, guaranteed education as far as your capacities could take you, free public education. I mean, a whole host of things, and I'm leaving out a longer list. But as soon as the labor movement heard that, as soon as the leaders, and there were two federations at the time, the AFL and the CIO, the trades and the industrial unions, both union federations immediately grabbed hold of that and not only worked hard to get FDR reelected to a fourth term, which he would die not long after he was inaugurated, but they made the Economic Bill of Rights fundamental to their own politics. They went out and they organized vast drives in favor of not only Roosevelt, but of securing an Economic Bill of Rights. And by the way, that remained part of their vision right through to the 1960s. And it's only indeed in the course of the 70s when that kind of thing is forgotten, you might say. And don't forget, the right and the neo-libs were very good at making an issue of what was going on in schools and in universities and the teaching of history. Well, how often have you heard of labor history being taught in the schools? How often have you heard of an Economic Bill of Rights spoken of? The Democrats, by the way, who sustained the vision? A. Philip Randolph. Okay? A. Philip Randolph sustained the vision and issued the Freedom Budget in 1965, a call for the federal government to go beyond the Great Society and lay out a 10-year plan to end poverty and redevelop rural and urban areas. And it was all framed in terms of FDR's Four Freedoms and Economic Bill of Rights. Later, Martin Luther King Jr., not long before his assassination in Memphis, called for an Economic Bill of Rights. Bernie would later call for an Economic Bill of Rights, but he didn't do it aggressively enough. It was on the website, but it wasn't aggressively enough. The point is that we need to have labor leaders embrace these kinds of things as part of their organizing effort in order to draw in others to the movement and to inspire their own workers as to where we're going. And the Democrats, I'm sorry, I'm throwing a million things onto the table. In 1972, the AFL-CIO, because of the McGovern Commission of 1968 and 69 and 70, basically lost its seat at the table in the Democratic Party. I want to see the Democratic Party reinvite the labor movement back into the party. And in fact, whatever I thought of Sean McBride's speech, if I got the name right, or is it O'Brien? Sorry, you know who I mean.
O'Brien, yeah. Is that who you're thinking of with the Teamsters? Yeah.
Right, sorry, I said the wrong name. O'Brien, when he went to the Republican convention and kissed, Vance and Trump, basically he was angry. He was angry on behalf of labor folks for quite some time. And the Democrats had no sense of history. Hell, they should have invited him along with Fain to the Democratic convention. The point is the Democrats have got to not only mouth, yeah, we're going to be the party that's going to support working people. They have to make it the party of working people and the labor movement.
Right.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I really appreciate, what you're saying in terms of bringing people into a broad vision of the future and how things could be better, how we as Americans could really live out these promises that have been made to us. And, because bottom line, we have to get millions of unorganized workers to start organizing, right? We have to have millions of people to get engaged with this movement, to make it a movement that is actually going somewhere beyond encirclement and retreat and defeat, which, it has been throughout this 50-year class war we've been discussing. Labor's percentage of the workforce has just continued to decline year after year after year. We'll see the new statistics coming out next week. I won't hold my breath for them. I don't know what it's going to look like, but even with the labor resurgence of the last few years, the popularity's through the roof. We're in the media more than we've ever been in our lifetimes, certainly me or Jacob's lifetime, but, it hasn't reflected in actual concrete membership numbers. We're not keeping up with the population. And so I think that's really important, that broad vision, something that really engages people to take a risk, and because it is a risk, particularly here in the South, to even, talk union is almost a scandalous thing in some environments. And for people to want to take that risk, to, stick their neck out, it has to be about something bigger than themselves, bigger than, anything that we're looking at now in terms of what's on offer from contemporary politics. So really appreciate that. And that, yeah, Jacob, I don't know what you had.
Yeah, that's it, Harvey. Unless you had, do you have any other any closing thoughts?
Well, let's put it this way: after the past week, past week and the nightmare that's ensuing, I think if we don't see some energy coming out of labor in terms of not just saying, well, we can, let's see what happens with the National Labor Relations Act. I mean, sorry, here's the last thought. I said to someone a couple of weeks ago when they nominated, the woman's name escapes me, the congresswoman who is now going to become presumably the Secretary of Labor,
Lori Chavez DeRemer.
Right, she's an unusual appointment for the Trump administration, but there's a force inside of the Republican Party which is trying to really lay hold of the working class and even trying to appeal to labor. And bizarrely enough, that's Josh Hawley, who's very, very eager to be seen as a champion of working people, as was Marco Rubio, hoping to do that. And I can tell you that if the Democrats don't figure out how to make more of their own history and how to, in essence, line up with labor, we're all going to be in for a really big shock.
Right.
Yeah. I did have another question, if you've got time, Harvey, and it comes.
I've got time.
Yeah, it comes from conversations we're having, particularly here in Alabama, where things are just so bleak in terms of the Democratic Party.
Oh, yeah.
I guess my question would be, for those of us who want to see this change and want to see a real response, is working within the Democratic Party the right answer now? Are there alternatives that we should be considering? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, my sense is that it would take too long, not for me to talk about it, too long to start creating the alternative to the Democratic Party. Okay. And that's why I think the alternative has to be from labor compelling the Democratic Party to become what it once was and might yet become again. Okay. I mean, I don't see a third party as an alternative. To me, the alternative is the labor movement really taking hold of the Democratic Party as much as possible. Unfortunately, there are labor leaders and friends of mine included who say, well, it's not worth pursuing politics right now. The Democratic Party is so bad. No, what is imperative is don't have an inside and outside perspective. You got to do both at the same time. That's the point.
Right. And I have a lot of conflicting thoughts about it, which I won't get into here, but I will just say that in the time period you really focused on in terms of the 30s and the 40s and in through the 50s and 60s, labor was so powerful, right, that both parties to varying degrees tried to appease us, tried to cater to us, right? And it was not as uncommon to have, pro-labor Republicans at the time, even staunchly bigoted, racist Dixiecrats in some cases were throwing, token concessions to the labor movement, in part because of our real genuine strength, right? So I think there's definitely something to that.
don't read too much into the kisses they might have sent. The Dixiecrats, they opposed labor as much as they opposed desegregation, because they knew that in spite of the racism that tended to prevail in the labor movement in the South at the time, that labor was going to bring an end to segregation. They knew it. I mean, I know the racism of labor coming out of the AFL-CIO, but don't forget, A. Philip Randolph, head of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, which was a black union, never left the AFL-CIO in favor of the CIO. And that tells you something about what he saw as possibilities that remained. Now, Dixiecrats did not want to embrace anything about labor. That's why Taft-Hartley Act is enacted in 1947, because the Southern Democrats and the Republicans made it happen. By the way, the reason that Southern Democrats didn't want national health care was not because it sounded socialist. They didn't want national health care because they didn't want to desegregate hospitals. I mean, they were driven by white supremacy, basically. And by the way, this is all in my book, The Fight for the Four Freedoms. Okay. I mean, they even try to use the Four Freedoms idea against national health care, which the mind boggles the mind. It just.
Right. Well, Harvey, really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Enjoy the conversation and look forward to bringing you on again.
Thank you. You guys are great. Keep up the good work.
Appreciate it.
Harvey J.K. is Professor Emeritus, the Ben and Joyce Rosenberg Professor Emeritus of Democracy and Justice Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay. Also a member of the American Federation of Teachers. Really appreciate Harvey taking the time to talk to us.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Lots of food for thought there.
We've got a caller on the line. Let's go ahead and bring a caller from a 510 area code on the air. What's your name and where are you calling from? Caller from a 510 area code.
Hey, y'all. This is Kat. I'm a proud member of Teamsters Mobilize and Maoist Communist Union. Been listening to y'all's show for a bit now. I had wanted to follow up because you mentioned the show that Sean O'Brien, president of the Teamsters, did with Josh Hawley recently, and the stuff he said about immigration. I think it was Jacob who said, like, it was not great, which I feel is an understatement. And just to underscore that, I want to give a direct quotation from that show. Towards the end of it, Sean O'Brien said, quote, "Social issues are all well and good, but protecting illegal immigrants that come into our country to commit crimes and steal jobs, that's a tough pill to swallow," end quote. Which is obviously just the same line that Donald Trump is putting forward. But I think beyond that, even more generally, it is fundamentally the same divide and conquer bullshit that the capitalist class has been using to pit immigrant workers against native-born workers for centuries in this country, actually. And it's directly contrary to a working class perspective of how we relate to workers who come to this country, which is that we should organize and invite those brothers and sisters into our unions so that we can fight together, fight against the bosses, and win not just economic victories, but as your last speaker was alluding to as well, like whole political victories for the entire working class. And that has happened time and time again throughout our history. So I feel like this kind of BS that Sean O'Brien is putting forward is really a betrayal of not just us in the Teamsters, but the working class movement generally. And I honestly think if somebody is thinking to themselves, oh, well, Sean O'Brien is putting forward like the capitalist perspective on immigration, but when it comes to his approach to organizing Amazon or protecting UPS workers against automation, well, then he'll just switch back to like representing the working class again. I think that's pretty diluted. And I do not think that to call that out is to attack our union. That's coming on my part from a place of deep love and commitment for the union, but we got to call it as we see it, call a spade, and that's pretty much it. So,
Thanks for the call, Kat.
Yeah, as Jose had mentioned, we're talking about the recent Amazon strike at our TM meeting tomorrow. So hope folks can make it out. Solidarity. Thanks, y'all, for the content here.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for the call.
Really appreciate the call, Kat, and appreciate your point about solidarity. It is really, it should be a no-brainer for those of us in this movement that we are for working people, and it doesn't matter what you look like, where you come from, what you talk like. If you're a worker, you're one of us. We are together. We should be together. We should organize together. That's how we're stronger. That's how we win. That's how we make our lives better. And that's how we resist the power of those who seek to oppress and exploit us. And, I think it's also something that I bring up pretty often when these conversations come up is that we don't examine the root causes of immigration, the root causes of refugee crises, and the roles in which, American foreign policy plays in contributing to these people having to come here in the first place to look for a decent life. Because that is one of the heartbreaking things about it, is that folks are having to flee homes. Often, literally flee their homes, but even in, more economic type situations, people having to abandon their homes and their families and their cultures, their countries, flee thousands of miles just to try to have a decent life, just to put a roof over their head and, make a living. Something's wrong with that. People shouldn't have to do that. Just like I feel like I shouldn't have to leave Alabama to have a decent quality of life, for my daughter to have a decent future, to have, even an average American standard of life would be an upgrade here in Alabama. And, but we have folks who are desperate to even come to a place like this, among the worst in the country. And so it's a really difficult conversation, and, appreciate the folks who are really speaking up for solidarity. I do not appreciate those who are pandering to xenophobia and to misinformation, because that is it's very harmful to folks. And I don't want to see any labor leaders, anyone speaking on behalf of our unions, engage in that kind of rhetoric, because we're better than that, or we should be.
Yeah. It was frustrating, and I appreciate the direct quote. If we clip this, I might get our editor to include the clip from the interview. But yeah, I listened to it, and I think that I'm just a bit, even though I am more and more becoming less and less sympathetic to Sean O'Brien and what he's doing at the Teamsters. I still think that there's some good things happening in the Amazon organizing that I'm excited about, and all of that stuff. But I listened to it, and I was like, come on, Sean, just give me one question. Just like one. This is, it's not like you're just talking to Hassan, who's a streamer, and you can just kind of paper over their differences. It's like you even as a senator, one of the 100 most powerful people in the country, it is very, very rare that your one vote has the opportunity to change the legal landscape for the better for millions of working people. And that is what Josh Hawley had the opportunity to do with the confirmation vote for Lauren McFerrin at the National Labor Relations Board.
Right.
And he voted against it. And when he was talking to Hassan, Sean O'Brien was lambasting, maybe rightly so, I don't know, but lambasting Kamala Harris for not getting there quickly enough. He was saying, maybe she had something, maybe, I can't even remember what it was, but maybe she was upset that she lost and she doesn't care anymore, and that's why it took her 15 minutes longer to get there than it should have. And completely going over, just completely absolving Josh Hawley, and literally the next thing that they talked about in that interview with where Sean O'Brien was on Hassan's show, literally the next thing that they talked about was how great Josh Hawley was.
and no mention of his vote against confirming Lauren McFerrin. Like,
right.
Ha!
Yeah, it's very frustrating because you don't have to do that, right?
You don't have to do that.
You can acknowledge when people that you typically disagree with do something good.
Right.
You can, and in fact, I think you should.
Yes,
I think you should. Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to point out when politicians that I frequently disagree with are doing something I can agree with, if it's actually going to help everyday people. And I'm willing to give people credit for that when they do that. Local example, State Senator Arthur Orr, he sponsored the really bad anti-union legislation last year that we fought so hard against. He sponsored the school choice bill. But you know what? He also sponsored a good bill that would have removed taxes on menstrual products and diapers. He, this year, is working on a bill that is, would be a step in the right direction on civil asset forfeiture reform. Doesn't mean I, am going to give the guy any money to his campaign. Doesn't mean if I had an interview with him, I would just be 100% positive. But I'm willing to say where we have common ground and appreciate that, respect that. But, I don't think you have to go so far as to, cheerlead for someone that clearly isn't always doing what you would like them to do. One would hope, right? Because as a labor leader, that action, I mean, you have to be, you have to be concerned about that, right? You can't just paper over that. So that's very concerning. I think you can be a little more delicate and strategic and still give people credit where credit is due and still try to be bipartisan or nonpartisan more ideally, but just call balls and strikes like you see them. And I don't think that's really what's happening. It seems like there's games being played, and unfortunately, some of the rhetoric that's being engaged in is just really hurtful.
Yeah, well, and the in part of his support for Josh Hawley, he has talked about how, we can agree to disagree on things that we disagree about, despite the fact that because of criticism of him by Rick Smith, he went on this huge crusade against Rick Smith and got Teamsters local unions to pull sponsorships for Rick Smith being the host of the Rick Smith Show, which is on, Rick Smith, a working Teamster, a member of the Teamsters Union, is on 50 radio stations nationwide, primarily in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. He's also on Free Speech TV. Does this while he still drives a truck as a working Teamster.
A true asset to labor media.
Genuinely,
whatever you think of his politics or his commentary or his show or content, whatever, like that is amazing. Doing something great for the labor media landscape.
Seriously. And when Sean O'Brien came into office, he stopped the Teamsters International sponsorship for the Rick Smith Show, and it was not an insubstantial amount of money. I don't know if it's public, so I don't want to say the amount, but it was a significant amount that the Teamsters International was supporting this program, and they pulled it. And Rick Smith still held his punches until Sean O'Brien went around to Teamster dinners and was saying that Rick Smith needs to make a public apology to Sean O'Brien if he wants to maintain his good relationship with his union, and then began behind the scenes bending arms of Teamsters local officials to get them to pull their sponsorship for the show. I mean, if you want to talk about, we can agree to disagree, whatever, and you can agree to disagree and have a great relationship and, be so really nice to Josh Hawley and about Josh Hawley, then you can agree to disagree with freaking Rick Smith.
One of your own members. Yeah.
For 30-something years, I think. I mean, yeah, it's really, I'm just more and more being grossed out.
Yeah, and that really bothers me on a fundamental level because I believe in union democracy. Right? If I'm in a position of authority and you want to criticize the hell out of me, go for it, right? That is your right as a member, and I support your right to do that. I may not like what you say. I may argue vigorously against you. that's all fine and well, right? But that's the nature of it. Unions are supposed to be democracies. They are by and for us, the workers who make up these unions, and they're accountable to us, the members. We should have free speech and free right to criticize leadership, to criticize the union as an institution, to criticize certain actions that are taken by the union or its leadership. That's all fair game, right? And we can sometimes disagree on approach and tone and all that kind of stuff. That's all fair game too. But at a fundamental level, I really am rubbed the wrong way when you have leaders who do not tolerate criticism.
Yeah.
Because I think it shows a weakness of leadership if you cannot tolerate criticism and debate. Because bottom line, none of us have all the answers.
Right.
And if you're not willing to listen to people who may disagree or who have critique, you're missing something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I will say, Rai says in the chat, Sean O'Brien definitely seems better than Hoffa Jr. I mean, even with all that said, that's probably where I would land. I mean, because Hoffa Jr. has done this same stuff.
That was your choice, right?
Right.
I mean, it is what it is.
And Hoffa Jr. did the same stuff when he was president of the Teamsters. You know, Frank Emspach also had a very popular union radio project that was on radio stations across the country that the Teamsters was supportive of, that Hoffa Jr. pulled the Teamsters support for a very similar reason, you know. So I mean,
that to me, that speaks to deeper levels of
a culture.
You've got to revive the culture, and so like you said, there's a lot of good work happening in the Teamsters Union. There's a lot of good brothers and sisters and siblings out there doing great organizing, you know, and want to celebrate that regardless of the leadership, what you think about them or what they're saying, doesn't invalidate the quality of the work that folks are doing to organize in places like Amazon and UPS to spread this movement. So I want to give my encouragement and, you know, solidarity to all of you out there who are in the Teamsters Union, who are doing that good work. Whatever your affiliations, whatever your thoughts about, you know, leadership or, you know, anything like that, whatever your caucus is, like, if you're putting in the work, I appreciate you, and I want you to keep doing that regardless of any, you know, controversies that may arise.
No more time for calls on the show today. We want to make sure that we get to 2 more segments before we wrap up here. First, I want to finish Boss Watch. Boss Watch is a segment that we do every single week. We try to get to it where we talk about what bosses were up to, particularly in the United States. In Alabama, federal workplace safety investigators found that a Decatur manufacturer of GE brand appliances failed to follow required machine standards that could have prevented a 58-year-old frontline supervisor's fatal injuries while trying to service a door molding machine. Inspectors with the U.S. Department of Labor's Occupational Safety and Health Administration opened an investigation of the July 2024 incident at Hayer U.S. Appliance Solutions Incorporated and found the company allowed workers to bypass the machine's safety doors and did not use required procedures to prevent employee injuries in the carousel-like machine. OSHA cited the company, which operates as GE Appliances, for one willful violation for failing to follow lockout-tagout procedures to de-energize the machine before allowing service or maintenance. Inspectors also cited Hayer for 2 serious violations for permitting employees to bypass interlocking safety doors to gain access to the machine and for not maintaining annual inspections for lockout-tagout procedures. The company faces $193,000 in proposed fines, the maximum that OSHA can legally recommend. The incident continues a history of 40 safety inspections dating back to 2016 at 2 Hayer U.S. Appliance Solutions manufacturing facilities in Louisville, Kentucky, and in Decatur, Alabama. These inspections included many machine safety violations, including 2 repeated and 2 serious violations of lockout-tagout requirements cited after a 55-year-old worker's fatality in Louisville in February of 2019. Staying in Alabama, Delaware-based TCI of Alabama, a recycler of large items such as transformers and electrical equipment, violated federal employment laws when it discriminated against female job applicants in its Pell City, Alabama location, the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission alleged in a lawsuit. The EEOC charged that since at least August 1st of 2020, TCI has discriminated against a class of female employees by systematically denying them labor positions because of their sex. The EEOC further alleges that TCI carried out this discrimination by instructing multiple staffing agencies not to place or refer females for TCI's laborer positions. Such conduct violates Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits employers from discriminating based on sex. The EEOC filed suit in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Alabama after attempting to reach a pre-litigation settlement through its conciliation process. The EEOC seeks monetary damages, including back pay, compensatory damages, and punitive damages for the class, as well as injunctive relief designed to prevent such unlawful conduct in the future. Over in Louisiana, the U.S. Department of Labor has recovered over $300,000 in back wages for 49 workers employed by a New Orleans landscaping company that misclassified them as independent contractors and, by doing so, denied them overtime pay. The department's Wage and Hour Division determined Pfeffler Lawns violated the Fair Labor Standards Act by failing to pay overtime at time and one-half an employee's rate of pay for hours over 40 in a work week and not keeping accurate records. Misclassification of employees as independent contractors is not legal or fair. It deprives workers of their hard-earned wages, benefits, and protections, said Wage and Hour Division Director Troy Moulton in New Orleans. Companies that misclassify employees also usually deny them workplace rights and benefits, including overtime pay, and they also enjoy an unfair competitive advantage over other companies that comply with the law. And now, the last segment that I wanted to get to today is this meteorologist in Minnesota that was fired for criticizing Elon Musk. This is meteorologist Sam Kuffel, was fired by CBS Channel 58 in Wisconsin. Milwaukee, Wisconsin, not Minnesota. I don't know why I thought it was Minnesota. But CBS 58 in Milwaukee, meteorologist Sam Kuffel wrote on social media criticism of Elon Musk's hand gestures, I guess we can say, at the inauguration event that many thought looked like a Nazi salute. She said something, and also it is worth mentioning that even as conservatives defended Musk, as this petition notes, insisting that he is just awkward, neo-Nazis themselves had no doubt as to what Musk was doing. Quote, "It wasn't even subtle, like a wave," commented white supremacist Nick Fuentes. That was straight up like Sieg Heil, loving Hitler energy. So, contemporary fascists seem to think that was a Nazi salute. Nevertheless, it doesn't really matter what was in his heart. Here's what Sam Kuffel said on social media. "You F with this and this man, I don't F with you, full stop." And after criticism of those remarks from a conservative radio host, she was dropped by CBS, who said she is no longer employed and a search for a replacement is underway. Now, I really could not care less what you feel was in Elon Musk's heart when he did what looked very much like a Hitler salute. Although I would ask you, what would he have to do for you to believe that is what happened? Because I can't imagine a situation where, in the world where we're at, where nobody is agreeing that or where conservatives don't agree that Elon Musk did a Nazi salute. What would it take other than for them to affirmatively say, yes, I did a Nazi salute, for you to believe it was a Nazi salute? That would be my question. But, I don't care if you don't think Elon Musk meant to give a Nazi salute. I could not care less about that. What I care about is that Sam Kuffel was fired for criticism that is, you must at least admit, reasonable to believe, of the richest person in the world. If you cannot make a criticism of the richest person in the world at your job, then we have serious problems with free speech in this country. And of course, I am not surprised that this cohort of free speech warriors like Ben Shapiro and like even Elon Musk, who Elon Musk said, if you tweeted something, we will pay for your legal bills if you got fired for tweeting something, which doesn't even make sense because you don't have a protected right in this country to tweet. You know, even as I'm talking about free speech as a principle, it is still the case that the First Amendment does not apply here because CBS 58 is not the government. So the government cannot force CBS 58 to employ Sam Kuffel. She does not have a constitutional right to this job, and she does not have a constitutional right to, to protections from repercussions from her speech in the private sector. Nevertheless, it is to allow something like this to stand, for the public to allow something like this to stand, would amount to a degradation of the norms of free speech in this country. And yes, if you have been on this free speech train for the last couple of decades and been talking about, oh, you know, it's so sad that these people who regularly write for the New York Times opinion section and have best-selling books and are always being interviewed on TV, they're being censored. If you have actually caped for millionaires so that we can hear their opinions more often than we do, then I do think that you are obligated to sign this petition on change.org titled Reinstate Fired Meteorologist Sam Kuffel to CBS Channel 58. I think that if you have been on those types of bandwagons, you are obligated to sign this because it is really an affront to a culture of freedom of speech that she has been fired for this. She worked for CBS for 5 years. She has been working for that company for 5 years, sacrificed 5 years of her life to this company, and they fired her because she did not have a politically correct opinion on the establishment. It's just so freaking gross, especially that it is coming because of, because of criticism of Elon Musk, because his whole shtick has been, I care about free speech. Free speech is so important. Free speech, free speech, free speech. Obviously, he has not spoken up about this. He has not said she should get her job back. And people that have fallen for his shtick, the idea that he actually cares about free speech, you should take a look at this situation and reevaluate some of your priors and the degree to which you believe that people like that Elon Musk and people like Elon Musk actually care about freedom of speech as an issue. And this is also another reason why workers everywhere need to unionize. If CBS Channel 58 was a union station, which I suppose it could be because it's in Wisconsin, my assumption is that it is not a union station, because if it was a union station, then there would be a union contract almost certainly providing just cause protections and due process rights for employees. And it would be much more difficult for them to fire her for something like that. That's why, everybody deserves a union so that you can shitpost, for lack of a better word, without fearing your boss. So there you go. You need to unionize, get it in a contract, the right to shitpost. And there you go. Just a really, really gross situation. My heart goes out to this poor girl, and hoping she is able to get her job back.
Yeah, hopefully Elon gives her some money, right? If he's going to stay true to his word.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is it from me. Adam, did you have anything that you wanted to make sure that we plugged?
I just want to remind folks to go to labornotes.org/events. There are some great calls coming up. My computer died, so I don't have the dates right in front of me, but over the next couple of weeks, I know they have a stewards workshop, they have an organizer workshop, they have one on steering green transitions. that sounds really interesting. So I do recommend, if you're not already on the Labor Nodes email list, you should be. Definitely check out these virtual trainings if you can. I definitely recommend it. They're free or low cost. Always very good. I highly, highly recommend any training Labor Notes does. It's always helpful and great people involved. So put those on your calendar, share those with your members, share that with your local. Make sure, folks in your local are aware of these resources that Labor Notes puts out, because it's not just these trainings that they do on a regular basis that you can do through Zoom. You can do in-person workshops and trainings. Jacob and I helped organize the Alabama Troublemaker School that we did back in the fall here in the Birmingham area. And it was a great time. You can work with them to do stuff like that. They also have resources and training guides available on the website, so you can do some of this stuff, back home, wherever home is to you. On other plugs, for those of you who are in Alabama, I do want to just pitch that Alabama Arise is going to hold a virtual legislative action briefing on Monday, February 3rd. That is the night before the legislative session starts in Alabama, right? So if you want to get the latest updates and hear the good, the bad, and the ugly coming out of Montgomery this year, you definitely want to tune into that. Go to alarise.org. Again, that's another email list that you want to be signed up for, those of you who are in Alabama, or if you just have a curious interest in what's happening here. It's a great way to stay informed, hear about some of the issues impacting poor and working class people, and some of the opportunities to take action. You can join Arise as a member, and as a member, you actually get to vote on the issue priorities and, participate, and you'll have access to, the daily news digest. You'll get legislative alerts, all that good stuff. So I do recommend anyone listening, if you're in Alabama and you're not already a member of Arise, you should be. You can join for free or with a donation of any amount. If you want more information, feel free to reach out to me directly or to the show. We can connect you to the right people. And again, that legislative action briefing is the night before the session starts, February 3rd. Really looking forward to hearing more about what's, at stake in Montgomery this year. It will not be all bad, I don't think. I think there are some opportunities to advance pro-working class legislation, even in this climate. There are some good bills that folks like Arise and our other allies are pushing, that our Labor Council is supporting. And so, Alabama folks, definitely stay tuned for that. Everyone else, make sure you're going to labornotes.org/events and check out those workshops and trainings. Really worth it. Now is a good time for us to sharpen our skills and to connect with other people who care about this stuff.
Yeah.
And that's all I have. I really appreciate the support. Appreciate everyone tuning in today. Appreciate the calls. And we're going to keep on growing this thing, and we can't do it without you.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Really looking forward to next week's program. Hope you'll come back, and we'll see you then.